Hi, I hope you're doing well. I'm here to remind you, never underestimate the power that you have to educate people properly. This past few weeks have been very interesting in some form and scary for some. Uh, for others of you, you're not surprised about situation going on in anywhere in your city and communities. The injustice is happening, the corruption is happening, but just never underestimate educating people. Okay? Here in this video, there's going to be a lot of videos to educate, so educational purposes and awareness, because that's what I do all the time. But I don't know if this will post because I've been kind of in punishment land for YouTube, because I'm exposing a lot of truth that can help a lot of my community make better decisions. So I hope that whatever we exposing here. Also, Siri keep asking me to do energy reading at the same time that I'm integrating the videos here. So thank you so much, guys, for liking, commenting, doing all the things that it has to be done. But yeah, I want to here to and also support all the content creators that are going to be in this video as well. Please, please, please go like, go follow them, go subscribe to the channels, go join their Substacks, go support the people who are taking the time to educate, not just themselves too, but the communities and stuff like that. And I never underestimated that for the past decade that I've been doing this, but it's more, the more you exercise that energy of truth, carney, and demanding justice anywhere in your life, anywhere, especially personally, spiritually, and also being aware that you are in a psychological spiritual warfare that is affecting a lot of things, right? Because we live in a system, it's a death called satanic and demonic energy. And we're also seeing this parasitic cancer like just spreading everywhere, and has been spreading for a long time. It's just that you haven't been aware, and it's been conditioned and programmed for you guys to stay aware. But never underestimate. That's why I'm here to teach and educate my people, and to be spiritually resilient, right? Like real resilient, and with the real truth information, because it is truth. When you are giving the right information and truth information, you act differently, right? Not only act differently, you have conscious, you have emotional intelligence, you develop your if you didn't have empathy before, you develop that empathy. You can't help it, because only someone who's demonic diabolical has no emotion or empathy for those people suffering that you're watching on my Telegram, right? There's multiple war crimes and situation, international law being violated in every possible way, and it's always the same fucking crippled parasitic energy, okay? They want this create smear campaigns, and I already warned you that that's their agenda, right? Like, they're going to target and put as an example those who are exposing the truth to you and disrupting things and making those parasitic oligarch billionaires that should not exist lose money. And that's what I'm here to do too. Educate a lot of you. But we're going to start in chunks. I know it's going to be a lot of overwhelming, and I know this video is going to be long, because there's a lot of educational subjects and things that we tend to talk about. First, I'm going to start with what happened in my city, Montreal, Quebec, and it's literally like so close to my place, which is why I was able to gather information from locals and stuff like that, and seeing, and also that too, when you give the right information to your local, to your community, they feel so like, so I was lied to? Wait, what the fuck? And then they do their own investigation, they do their own research, and they come back to you like, thank you so much. I found out the truth, and holy shit. So that too, people never forget how you make them feel. It's a true thing, especially when you're truthful, especially when you give them the right information. And it happens also when you not just here in platforms and you're talking to people, talking to your neighbors, talking to your friends, talking to other communities. And on top of it all, for some of you, there's people who don't really go with you, ride with you, okay? But all of a sudden, now because you have revealed a truth that they weren't aware of, and they're grateful for it because they don't want to look a fucking damn ass. For some of you, some people, they don't give a shit. But for some of you, someone like literally is connected to a community where they didn't know this, and now they're aware and did the research, and right away they're like, oh shit, I need to tell my community. So they already telling their whole community like, did you see this? Did you notice this? And that ignites the seed, and then everybody, they don't need the media, they don't need the propaganda. They just do their own research and then gather. And also, a lot of you, if you provide those sources, or the content creators provide you the sources, most of my sources are on Telegram or my redosip.com, my Substack. I'm constantly restacking. So if you look at the restack, there's a lot of people with sources and stuff like that. But you can do your own research, and then you're teaching other people how to do that research too. So don't ever underestimate planting the right seed. The seed of truth, that little mustard seed that Christ consciousness have been telling you, never underestimate that mustard seed, especially when we're living in a corruption in a world like this, okay? So that surprised me this week, because I was like, I would have never expected that person or people or community to be like, yeah, they didn't tell us this, that this police kill the actual innocent person, and they've been blaming, not saying the incel fucking motherfucking weirdo, but he was going after the pornography CEO, the pornography industry, you know, that is very thriving here in Montreal, Quebec. Yeah, it's in the middle of cities, malls, people, metro subways, hospitals. That's what the media, they don't want to tell you, and they're not going to tell you that, because at the end of the day, it's an elite rapist, right? Pedophile, right? Who owns this. And I'm not giving the credit to the incel situation, because that's fucked up. This guy has some serious hatred towards women. Like, what the fuck? Like, I still don't understand, how can you be so hateful towards women? I don't get it. You were born through a woman. What the fuck? How indoctrination program are you? Seriously. I digress. Let's, but I have some information that I'm going to give you about that through other content creators, and also doing my own research and confirming those information that those creators have put out there, So all the stuff that I put here has been discerned, has been guided by spirit and our divine mother and father, our creator. And also he said that whatever is going on with the protesters, any of the protesters being put in prison, that's personal. Divine or creator are going after all those lobbyists, all those. So that's why everything is divinely timing. Know that prophets also have to go to prison. That's why he showed you in Bible situation. Not saying that all those people were righteous and all that, because they were kind of creepy and weird ass energy. There's always some weird ass energy in the Bible. Most of the truth is not really exposed in the Bible, so that's why I don't want to cite everything from there, because even spirit tells me you have to discern it, because some weird ass energy wrote that and that wasn't true. So when you have that intuition, that connection with the source, which is why colonizers and billionaires are trying to block it for you, right? And then the whole AI situation and trying to fucking put it on your throat when we don't want that, right? It is without our consent, when stuff is being thrown on their throat without information, without it's just benefiting the 1%, and then you have the little parasitic energy, demonic agents protecting these people, not just politicians, but also, this is why I say we have to defund the police, because they're not doing their job. They're here to defend elites, pedophile rapists, okay? And also some of them are in cults of white supremacy energy that, yeah, so Spirit keeps confirming that a lot. And I know you know it's true, especially if you have been educating yourself, decolonizing, and listening to Black women, Black people, Indigenous people. You will know, and they've been ringing the alarm for I don't know how many years now. You'll know. So then, this is where, when you get the right information, the truth exposed to you, you do better. You fix your karmic energy. This is why, for a lot of us who are generational curse breakers, who are educators, teachers, fascists, hate writers, healers, and educators. Why is that? I want you to think. You're going to see some videos now.
If you haven't heard, there was a shooting in Montreal at around noon today in the 𝂀𓁧𓁞𓁢𝁢 neighborhood. Already there is a tsunami of propaganda trying to reframe what's happened to fit the Zionist narrative. From the video evidence, the shooter lured police to a certain location, murdered one cop, the cop murdered a bystander, and then the cops killed the shooter as well. There's footage of an arrest made nearby, but it's unclear whether that individual is involved in the shooting. At the moment, the narrative that's being spun is that the shooter murdered the bystander, who happens to be a rabbi. However, the video evidence strongly suggests that the cop killed the bystander. At the moment, the Hasbro machine is trying to make it seem as if the shooter was hunting Jews in a Jewish neighborhood, which neither one of those claims is true. In fact, you can see clearly in the video the shooter walks right past the bystander. But the facts haven't stopped them from telling the lies again and again and again and again and again and again and again. Something else that I've found very disturbing is that a member from 𝂀𝁧𝁞𝁢 is involved in this situation now. For those who don't know what 𝂀𝁧𝁞𝁢 is, it's an organization founded by a serial rapist known as the Haredi Jeffrey Epstein. This organization is responsible for fabricating some of the most atrocious atrocities after October 7th. Mass rape, fetuses cut out of bellies, beheaded babies, babies cooked in ovens. So don't be surprised if this event is used as the foundation for a new regime of suppressive laws.
Incel that decided he could try to take matters into his own hands like a fucking dweeb that he is, who is now down in the lower room. Now you realize this is not getting many headlines anymore because at first they tried to call it a Jewish attack, but then they realized, one, it was a white boy that was attacking police officers and leaving the civilians in the Jewish neighborhood completely safe, but then also they're attacking pornography companies. He's like, bro, the CEOs, the people that run Pornhub, all that type of shit, y'all ain't shit and y'all need to fucking die. And it just so happens those people are Jewish. But one officer was killed, and then a civilian was shot by the other officer in the head because she panicked. Was like, oh shit, who's that? And then killed him too. I think the most interesting thing is the manifesto. I'm starting to realize there's a lot of losers coming up. And it's no offense to y'all, but it's just like, they have no social interaction, and they watch these certain people that, because they didn't maybe have success with women growing up, that they shit on them and like, you gotta be in the house. You know, women are supposed to do this. This is a patriarchal society. And it's just like, nigga, just go out into the real world and talk to people. Get off fucking Discord and Reddit. But they have this close-knit community that they feel like they have support when in reality, nobody supports y'all. You guys are fucking dweebs. I mean, Israel has tried to hijack this entire attack and be like, this is all about us. We had a rabbi killed. It's like, no offense. Rest in peace to that rabbi, but he got killed by a cop. People messaging like this that shows you what they actually care about, where they don't name the police officer because his name was Muhammad. They don't name the shooter because regular white kid, but they take the time to name the rabbi, but they don't say how he was killed, which was by the cop, which I'm not going to sit here and blame her. That's a high intense situation. You just seen your fellow officer get shot, and I don't know, though, like, how you didn't know that was a civilian right there. Like, you just seen, bro. And you just panic and shot, bro. Like, that shit's crazy. But she's now in stable condition. The person attacking made it specific. He was after cops and people that own things like porn companies. Now, choice of location, when you look at it, seems pretty obvious because ILO is the company that is on the exact same street. And what do they own? Pornhub, YouPorn, whole bunch of them motherfuckers is owned by them. Now, do those also have Israeli ties? Yes, but they don't want this to all of a sudden now be anti-Semitic attack, but say, oh shit, we can't let them know we own that media too. That would be a bad look. There was quietly another California shooting at a library where 2 people were shot by another fucking special white breed indeed. I'm just saying, sound about white. That's the problem that we consistently run into, is these motherfuckers that have no real social interaction, stuck on the internet, living on the internet, and then all of a sudden, I just gotta kill somebody because you know what? I'm gonna be remembered in history. No, you're not. No, you will not. You will be forgotten in 24 hours. I don't even know your fucking name.
All right, so I spent the last couple of hours digging through the reporting on the Montreal shooting and the massive manifesto that was tied to it. And I got to say that it was a doozy, and I think a lot of people are going to get it wrong. So first of all, let's not try to put this guy into any neat political box, because that manifesto was over 100 pages of pure chaos. Like, it had everything from anti-capitalistic rants to anti-communist rants to conspiracy garbage to attacks on elites and bankers and Zionist references. Like, one security analyst that looked at it called it a salad bar ideology. And I think that is a perfect description for some of the crazy conspiracy shit that's peddled in the manosphere online these days. But here's the kicker, right? Underneath all of that, of course, there was the obsession with women, right? This entire manifesto, the underlying message of this entire manifesto was the creepy, reoccurring talk about intimacy and what incel spaces call hypergamy, right? It talked about involuntary loneliness and how average dudes get left behind while, a couple of the chads get all the attention, right? And it blames feminism for that. It blames modern society for that. And even though the manifesto itself didn't use the word incel, it didn't need to, because researchers and psychologists and people who study these groups recognize the language and they clocked it right away, right? And this isn't theoretical, because Canada's already been here before. We had the 2018 Toronto van attack. Do you guys remember that? It unalived 10 people, and that was incel linked. And then in 2020, we had a teenager that unalived a woman in Toronto and got charged under terrorism laws because of the ideology behind that, right? Now, CSIS has straight up warned us that there is a growing, anti-feminist, violent extremism that's becoming a full-blown national security concern. Now, here's what gets me, right? We know that our parliament has actually studied this stuff. We've had witnesses that told the House that economic uncertainty and isolation amongst young men are going to be exploited, basically, by influencers who build their entire brands on blaming and hating women, right? And these influencers are monetizing on these young men's frustration. And what was also found is that 40% of young men trust these online influencers more than anyone, including their own parents. And most parents have zero clue what their kids are consuming. So, look, not everyone who's watching this crap is going to pick up a weapon, right? Obviously. But these online spaces are just echo chambers where resentment and conspiracy theories and, anti-woman nonsense just feed off each other and build and build. And researchers and a lot of us women have been yelling about this for years, and it always seems like nothing's really getting done about it. And now we have police coming out and saying that they're terrified of copycats after this recent shooting, because these communities end up glorifying these past attackers. And guess what? This manifesto that this guy wrote, it name-checked earlier incel-linked unalivers. So here's the bottom line, okay? This is not a one-off lunatic story. It is a growing online ecosystem that intelligence agencies and researchers and parliament have all been talking about and tracking. And we've already seen multiple Canadian attacks linked to these ideas. So you can argue about what causes and solutions there are all day long, but we just can't keep pretending that this is just like angry dudes yelling in basements anymore, right? It's not. It's real, it's here, and it's not going away. So what are we going to do?
I found the Prime Minister's comments about the Iran war being worth it.
Yeah, so for those who need extra clarification, they posted this in the middle of the night. Most of us on Telegram are exposing this all the time. This is not the first time that he just says this all the time. You were dealing with a war criminal or someone who, a sadist, right? He feeds off, he's not hiding it anymore. It's plain sight that he idolizes this entity, and now they're rising landlords who rise the prices, so our salary should be raised, right? We need socialism, communism, this needs to be fired. Worth it? How evil can you get to be to say the genocide and ethnic cleansing is worth it? Fuck this bitch.
This is how you know Israel has their hands on your local police.
Jurisdiction over what's happening in Israel.
Of course, but you do have jurisdiction over who EPS learns from. That is part of what you do. Can I finish? And do I get my full time? Furthermore, the Israeli police run under National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir, a man convicted of supporting a terrorist organization and inciting racism. He has ordered mass arrests of Palestinians while halting enforcement.
But it does not speak to decisions of how policing happens in the city. It's a debate for another place.
I will stop talking about Ben-Gvir if that's what you want.
Thank you.
So that was me speaking at the Edmonton Police Commission meeting. Our police chief, Warren Dreichel, I don't know, went to Israel to learn from their police. Recently, after 3 months of listening to us, they've decided to start censoring us or banning us from speaking altogether. And the way they do this is by saying that these topics are not within their purview. If it's not within the purview of the Edmonton Police Commission to discuss how Israeli police, then why is it within their purview to approve trips to Israel to learn how their police? So not surprisingly, I can't show you the whole video because they haven't posted the video yet. Also not surprising, 𓂀𓁧𓁞𓁢 has stopped showing up to these meetings entirely. He doesn't want to be held accountable for this egregious act of his. What was kind of shocking to me was how much they really did not want me talking about Ben-Gvir. And just a reminder, he runs the Israeli police. This is who Edmonton Police Service want to learn from. Let's look at what Ben-Gvir said just today. For every tear of an Israeli mother, 1,000 Lebanese mothers must weep. All of Lebanon must burn. Free Palestine, and apparently free Edmonton.
I'm going to read you a quote, and then afterwards you're going to tell me what you think it's about. Biological limits are real, but digital potential is infinite. If we starve our data infrastructure of cooling resources just to sustain baseline human comfort, we are actively delaying the birth of a superintelligence that could solve all of our resource problems in the first place. Sometimes we just have to prioritize the intelligence that will save us over the biology that slows us down. This is Jeff Bezos, one of the richest men in the world, trying to rebrand water, a basic necessity that every human being needs to survive, to cooling resources that support baseline human comfort. Not survival, comfort. All of this in the pursuit of an idea of artificial superintelligence that we are nowhere near close. Because what data centers are powering are large language models. There is no such thing as artificial intelligence. It's a brand. Because there's no agreed definition of intelligence. And the use of language here is both dehumanizing and masterful. Because what he's saying here is, screw your survival. I bet a lot on this technology, and if I don't get my way, I will have less money. Billionaires don't care about us and have lost touch with their humanity, something that we already know. The problem is that people like him, like Peter Thiel, like 𓂀𓁧𓁞𓁢, yes, because your favorite is no better than anyone else, like Elon Musk, are not acting on their own. They're a part of a network that doesn't just include billionaires. It was shown through the dual exposures of the Epstein files and Peter Thiel's Dialogue Society. Work includes writers, thinkers, philosophers, economists, politicians, tastemakers, philanthropists, charitable donors, people who shape policy, who behind the scenes pass on the message that it's worth to sacrifice your survival to a future superintelligence that is far from guaranteed. The so-called Epstein class. Some people consider the term Epstein class a populist term. It attached the label of something absolutely uncontroversibly horrifying, which is the trafficking and sexual assault of women and girls. Something that is also horrifying, but that we have been trained to see as normal. The influence peddling corrupted networks that allow Jeff Bezos to come out in public and put a question mark on your absolute necessity to drink water.
Oh no, a list of members and guests for a secret society co-founded by Peter Thiel just leaked? What timeline is this? Anyway, I have the list. And there are naturally some interesting, if somewhat unsurprising, names on it. There are two lists, but let me explain what Dialogue is first. So in addition to this list, which was released publicly, a second list also leaked with additional information, and Wired supposedly got a copy of this. They have not published everything that was on there. They just described certain details included and some names, which by the way is classic Wired and deeply annoying, because them getting to pick and choose what names are relevant or important enough to release and withholding the rest is inherently problematic for obvious reasons. But even more so when I tell you that one of the names on the publicly released list is Nick Thompson, current CEO of The Atlantic and former editor-in-chief of Wired. Now, I'm not saying that he's involved in anything, untoward or suspicious here specifically, and I'll get more into the caveats in a second, but it does make it pretty clear that there could very well be a conflict of interest for the names that Wired has access to and what they decided to release or not. Again, I'm not asserting that that is what happened, but it's worth thinking about. But regardless, we've heard sort of snippets about Dialogue for a while. It is a private invitation-only organization co-founded in 2006 by Peter Thiel. It convenes U.S. officials, foreign government figures and Silicon Valley executives at off-the-record annual retreats. It spent 2 decades declining to disclose its members. Every once in a while, there is like a bit of a leak regarding dialogue. A couple of years ago, someone leaked an invitation to one of these retreats. Also, more recently, the 2014 retreat had gotten a little bit more buzz because of a forwarded invitation in the inbox of a certain disgraced financier named Jeff. And the data that Wired accessed is interesting because it doesn't just include names of attendees for the 2026 conference, as well as their status as attendees versus guests and like how long they've been attending these retreats, which is interesting and valuable information also. But it also includes some information on the programming for this year, off-the-record sessions including Money Does Buy Happiness, Bring Back Nuclear, Navigating World War III, Battlefield Technologies, Build a Cult, moderated by the founder of the Christian networking site Pray.com, and Build a Party, run by a former White House national security official. I mean, it doesn't not sound like summer camp for supervillains. Internal documents also urge moderators to remind participants that everything is off the record and comments should be concise and non-obvious. It also coaches them to model brief introductions to avoid status signaling. Even so, as Wired puts it, this discipline imposed by the group did not extend to its website. Apparently they left the directory like publicly in its code in like comments or something. So it was basically available to anyone who looked. They also disclosed a couple of additional names, and I'll go through the ones that jumped out at me in a second, but first, a caveat. The publicly released list includes very few details. So we do not know if these people are members or guests, when they attended, why, anything like that. We don't know if they perhaps attended something 2 decades ago when this first started or are planning to attend this year. And I do think that's worth noting because some of these people may have just attended a random AI conference for rich people like over a decade ago, back when Peter Thiel wasn't necessarily the same type of household name he is now, and when political discourse and concerns about AI were somewhat different. So like, being on this list doesn't necessarily mean that you're a supervillain or you're besties with supervillains or anything like that. People may have just attended a conference. Let's be fair here. I'm going to be honest. If I was invited to something like this, I would go because I am nosy. I'm nosy. Yeah, I'm just nosy. That said, it is still worth pointing out and scrutinizing the idea that some of these individuals may have been rubbing elbows. For example, not only are there some politicians on the list, but you also have regulators that are hanging out with people and CEOs from corporations in the industries that they're supposed to be regulating. This is also not like the type of conference that, you or I would ever be invited to. This is very clearly just accessible to a certain echelon of society. Now, largely, it seemed to be a very conservative crowd, unsurprisingly. Some of the names are not going to be shocking to you right off the bat. Jared Kushner, Elon Musk, other members of the PayPal mafia, Chamath Palihapitiya, who's another billionaire with I think several podcasts, lots of tech CEOs, especially in the AI space, OpenAI, Google, Palantir, of course. Scooter Braun is on there, the music mogul with lots of allegations against him. Also, most recently, Sydney Sweeney's boyf. But there are also, politicians and members of the government, not just the US, some international, but I'm going to focus on the US, including Scott Bessent, current US Treasury Secretary, Ted Cruz, no explanation needed. Cory Booker was an interesting name and not at all surprising. I know I said not to read too much into these names because they could have attended like 2 decades ago, but let's just say I wouldn't be shocked if Cory Booker was attending this year too. We know he's close with some of these people and not entirely afraid to do certain favors at certain times, like approving certain appointments, like Scott Bessent, for example. Mitch Daniels, he was former governor of Indiana, and he was part of the Bush cabinet. Will Scharf, White House staff secretary and assistant to Trump. Representative Jim Himes of Connecticut, who is the ranking member of the House Intelligence Committee, which has a bunch of contracts with a bunch of these companies, including Palantir. Wes Moore was kind of surprising. He's governor from Maryland, Dem. Jared Polis, who I just talked about, he's the governor of Colorado, who is a Democrat, heavy on the quotation marks. He just granted clemency to the poll worker for You can imagine what. Jim O'Neill, who was Deputy Secretary of Health and Human Services and Acting Director of the CDC under Trump for a while. A couple of lobbyists like Leonard Leo, who's chairman of the Federalist Society, hyper-conservative. Grover Norquist, anti-taxes. As well as people involved in politics in other countries, especially in the EU. Some Saudi Arabian officials. According to Wired, General Alexis Grinkiewicz, NATO's Supreme Allied Commander Europe and the head of U.S. European Command, who took the post in July 2025 and is recorded on the leaked list as having attended dialogue gatherings since 2021. Ugh. Also, according to Wired, none of the registrants used a government email address. All of them used personal or corporate email addresses, meaning that they wouldn't be subject to releases like under FOIA requests. They're keeping this very much off the books. Also interesting and apparently attending this year, Jonathan Greenblatt, the chief executive of the Anti-Defamation League. Not entirely surprising there either. Why wouldn't the head of the ADL want to attend a super secret event orchestrated by the architect of American fascism? Or attended by the guy who sent his heart out to everyone. Peter Gottler, president of the conservative Cato Institute, Ryan Stowers, the executive director of the Charles Koch Foundation, etc., etc. One funny name I chuckled at, Ezra Klein. I never liked that guy. Again, caveats and all that. Sam Harris is also on the list. Also kind of funny, by the way, Joseph Gordon-Levitt. That didn't surprise me. You may have seen my video on him from a couple months back. It is kind of funny that the guy who's running around trying to sundown Section 230, one of the most important protective pieces of legislation we have for speaking openly on the internet, who claims that he's just trying to protect us and the children from evil big tech and evil big tech CEOs, is hanging out with all the evil big tech CEOs. Whatever, JGL, I'm on to you. There are like a handful of journalists, some writers. Again, who knows if this was just like a curious thing. Again, nosy. So if I ever got invited and could somehow afford it, I would be there. I would be there. And I would encourage anyone else who likes chisme to go as well. Also, it is worth acknowledging that even if you don't agree with a group of people, it is very handy to have certain connections to insiders. You never know what is going to come in handy. Information is power. Don't forget that. So again, simply being on the list doesn't inherently mean anything very explicit or specific, but you know, it's interesting. It's worth keeping an eye on. Maybe if Wired would release their list and additional information, we could get a little bit more of a sense of who's actually active in this and attending now, etc. But we'll see. Maybe they'll just decide that no, we don't get to see all the names. They get to pick for us. I like you, Wired, but come on.
So what is dialogue? Because it's not a conspiracy, and it's not a coup. It's not a war room. At least, not in the way you've been taught to imagine these things. It's a group of people who are there because they have enough money to get to meet in secret and with anybody else who has enough money, loathe all of the people that they keep structurally beneath them just to feel superior. I don't think that it's fair to say that this is our rulers or an emerging parallel government, because that honours them with a kind of strategic competency that I don't think they deserve. The people who will attend Powers Court are used to going on these kinds of retreats. They're members of these elite spaces where they pay dues. When they arrive in Powers Court, they will get assigned seats next to maybe a surveillance CEO or the head of the Treasury. And they will talk about whatever they want to. What do you talk about at a mixer? This is off the job. Nobody is taking their minutes. None of them used their government email when they signed up. It is a social network. One of the pages the hackers found was a dating app. The glue that binds these motherfuckers together is their mutual hatred of us. The contempt for people who didn't get the same lucky dice roll. The dating app is not matchmaking, again, in the way that you'd understand it. This is the output of centuries of dynastic European interrelations. This is a purity filter. This is how they keep the money inside the circle, through dialogue. Your assigned seat next to the surveillance CEO is at the Build a Cult workshop. This class has abandoned even the pretense of meritocracy. They know it's luck. They know they're a cult. That is the secret thrill that binds them socially. And they are trying to turn their shared luck in life into permanent architecture that can never be removed from them. What they will discuss at this Powers Court event, if no Fenians want to run them out of town, are all the Orwellian laws and hostile takeovers that they are going to plan out for the next or possibly last decade of your life. These people are not thinking critically about the cause and effect of their behaviour on the rest of us or the necessity of any of this shit. They are simply excited to be in the room, driven by their own social desire for belonging in something that's elevated and special to their ego, not you, plebeian. To them, we aren't people, we are data points. They don't even see us. They don't even put two and two together. They see the spreadsheet and the language and the things, the selling and the metrics and the imperialism that they have eaten, along with everything else. So, using the original Hackers 113 list, not Wired's inflated and confusing 200 plus list. Pause to read. Also think that it's important to specify these are not attendees of one event. These are members of dialogue. Fee paying ongoing. Here are just some of the most concerning. Scott Besnett, the sitting Treasury Secretary. This man controls the literal levers of economic warfare in the most war-hungry country the world has ever known. He is in control of the petrodollar. Ugh, what a role. He is in control of the financial stability of an entire nation of people who pay tax. He is in charge of the regulatory apparatus that oversees every bank, every market, and every billionaire in that room. His presence at the getaway retreat, the dating excursion in August, is a direct, undeniable structural corruption of public office. This is not a conference, this is a membership society that requires payment, structurally proven through their website code. They had Stripe set up and they were using Airtable for the data. If he discusses anything related to anything, about anything, even if he says nothing, if he simply raises an eyebrow, he's made the price of being there worth it for everyone else. And I'm sure he would love the attention. But he did take an oath to his constitution. Also confirmed Dan Driscoll, Secretary of the US Army, literally overseeing the entire war machine. He is in charge of procurement and budgets. Again, this is what they're paying access to. The dialogue roster includes multiple founders and CEOs of the exact kind of AI targeting systems and surveillance platforms that want to sell themselves to the US Army. It is quite literally the entire crew with Peter Thiel and Joe Lonsdale and Elon Musk and the fucking Army Secretary, with battlefield technologies on the agenda. So what is the point of wasting everyone's time with the charade of democracy? The army civilian leader uses a private dating app with the people that want to make and sell more weapons for the army. We'll get to the dating app. Kaya Kallas is uniquely alarming. This is the Vice President of the European Commission. She shapes regulatory and diplomatic posture for the entire European Union. She's also the former Prime Minister of Estonia, a nation that is understandably still quite emotional about the Soviet Union. But I have seen this woman project her trauma onto decisions she makes on behalf of the entire EU, and that is terrifying. She uses the fear of Russia in Estonians, rightfully so, to push for these dark surveillance contracts. She manipulates Eastern Europeans' fear to use against them to spend their own money on things that are killing them, regardless of Russia, and actually provoke Russia. If you ever even listen to what the Kremlin says, they say that you need to stop arming their border. What does she do? Goes to fucking summer camp with Peter Thiel. and the head of the US Army, and Jared fucking Kushner. I have added the full list of members to my website with a drop down that explains who they are and their photograph and categorizes them so that you can toggle between the categories and look at the attendees from politics, government, tech, AI, media, culture, finance, capital.
FIFA gave Donald Trump a peace prize? Ew. So naturally, I wanted to know what the fuck. So I went down a rabbit hole, and it turned out to be significantly worse than I expected. In December 2025, FIFA gave the President of the United States their peace prize. You know, for peace. The citation said something about his unwavering commitment to advancing peace and unity throughout the world. Huh? That's crazy, right? Because in April 2025, the federal government that this man runs deported a 4-year-old with stage 4 cancer. His name is Romeo. He has a 7-year-old sister named Ruby. She's also an American citizen. They were deported right alongside their mother, Rosario, back to Honduras. ICE refused to let their attorneys speak with them. They were lied to about where they were going, and they were gone in 3 days. That same week, another American citizen toddler named Jade, 2 years old, was deported with her mother, Julia. Same procedure, same Louisiana ICE office. The man whose government deported these children got a peace prize. In the 6 months since, this administration has deported over 500,000 people. ICE is killing American citizens. Fans from Haiti, Iran, Senegal, and the Ivory Coast cannot enter the country hosting their own teams. Visitors from the rest of the world, they're being asked to hand over their social media to be screened for anti-Americanism. FIFA was told, Amnesty International, the ACLU, the NAACP, Human Rights Watch, 90 organizations signed a letter, and FIFA gave him the prize anyway. They brought that tournament here anyway. So I went looking at what FIFA is because I didn't really know much about the sport, if I'm being honest. FIFA's a criminal enterprise, and I am not exaggerating. In 2015, the DOJ indicted 9 FIFA officials on racketeering, wire fraud, and money laundering. The indictment covered over $150 million in bribes over 2 decades. Eventually, 45 people were charged. Over $200 million in documented bribes. The 2018 World Cup in Russia was bought with bribes. The 2022 World Cup in Qatar was bought with bribes. A FIFA vice president named Jack Warner took $5 million in bribes from Russia for his own vote. That's the public indictment. FIFA's last president, Sepp Blatter, he ran the organization for 17 years, and he was ousted for ethics violations during the same scandal. This is not an organization that's lost its way. This is what FIFA is. They've been bribed for decades to award tournaments to authoritarian governments. Argentina 1978. FIFA held the World Cup there. Meanwhile, the government was disappearing tens of thousands of its own people. Black people. Russia 2018. FIFA held the World Cup there while Russia was still at war with Ukraine. Russia had annexed Crimea in 2014. Russia had shot down a passenger plane over Ukraine in 2014, killing all 298 people on board. Russia was still occupying eastern Ukraine when the tournament kicked off. Multiple governments asked FIFA to move it. Sepp Blatter refused. And I really don't give a shit if I'm pronouncing his name wrong. The games went on. Qatar 2022. The Guardian documented 6,500 migrant workers from South Asia. They died in Qatar during the decade after FIFA awarded them the tournament. Most of them are buried in unmarked graves. Their families were never compensated. For most of that decade, Qatar's kafala labor system legally trapped migrant workers and made it illegal for them to change jobs or leave the country without their employer's approval. Being gay in Qatar was punishable by prison. FIFA knew all of it, and FIFA still played the games anyway. And now the United States in 2026, while this country is deporting 4-year-old cancer patients, the man running all that is wearing a FIFA Peace Prize. Are y'all mad yet? You should be.
So we're going to talk about socialism and communism today. I feel like the main argument I hear against socialism and communism is, oh, it never works. Oh, it sounds good, but it doesn't work. And honestly, I feel like people who argue against it make the mistake when they respond to that. They immediately start trying to prove socialism or communism worked somewhere. But I think that's the wrong conversation. I think the better question is, when was socialism or communism ever allowed to fail or succeed on its own? So now, riddle me this. Can you name a major socialist or communist movement the United States did not intervene in? Like, no sanctions, they didn't isolate them, they didn't destabilize them, they did not invade them, they didn't fund opposition against them, they didn't, support a coup or an embargo. No, probably not. Cuba, the embargo, invasion attempts, assassination attempts, covert operations, Chile, the 1973 coup, Nicaragua, the Contra War, and the CIA funding the crack epidemic. Yeah, it's a fun one. Vietnam, decades of war, Korea, the Korean War, Guatemala, the 1954 coup, Grenada, U.S. invasion, Laos, covert war, Cambodia, bombing campaigns, Angola, Cold War intervention. This is like just a few of them. Before we go any further, ask yourself this. Would capitalism survive the same treatment? Imagine every capitalist country under embargo, constant assassination attempts. We've got foreign-backed insurgencies, economic warfare, military threats. Let's be realistic. Would any economic system thrive under those conditions? I think the better angle is if socialism was guaranteed to fail on its own because it doesn't work, why would the United States be having to spend billions of dollars trying to stop it if it doesn't work? So now let's talk a little history. A big reason the United States justified so many of these interventions, is what we'll call them, is something called the domino theory. So this was popularized, I think, during the Eisenhower administration, but it was repeated by a lot of people throughout the Cold War. But it was a theory that argued that if one country became communist, neighboring countries would eventually follow, like a row of falling dominoes. And the idea became one of the primary justifications for U.S. involvement. The fear wasn't that just a single country would adopt socialism or communism. The fear was that it would eventually keep spreading and it would hit the United States. So whether you agree with that theory or not, it does kind of help explain why the United States was willing to spend enormous amounts of money, resources, political capital, trying to prevent socialist governments from taking power around the world. But the issue that I have with it is that it challenges this argument that socialism or communism doesn't work. Because if it doesn't work, then how is it spreading? Why are you so scared of it? Another reason why I feel like that argument doesn't really work too well is that people will pull up failures of socialism or communism as proof that socialism or communism doesn't work. But every failure under capitalism is not proof that capitalism doesn't work. It just means that the corruption is bad. It's the politicians' fault. Bad management, right? We've got high homelessness, people going bankrupt, there's child poverty, hunger, financial crashes, student debt. Historically, capitalism has produced the Great Depression, the 2008 financial crisis, massive inequality, repeated recessions, and colonial extraction across the world. And colonial extraction, to put it lightly, is when powerful countries build wealth by taking land, labor, minerals, oil, resources from colonized nations and leaving them poorer and less developed. The wealth flows outward and the consequences stay behind. So when people ask, when has socialism ever worked? When has communism ever worked? I think we should ask a different question. Why has the most powerful capitalist country on earth spent so much time making sure socialist and communist projects never get the chance to develop on their own? Let's answer that question. Before I get into why the United States absolutely is terrified of socialism and communism, I really urge you to look into some examples, and I would suggest you start with operations that shaped the Cold War. So look up Operation PB Success. It helped overthrow Guatemala's government after land reforms threatened the profits of the United Fruit Company. Another one that some of us should know already, the Bay of Pigs invasion, was an attempt to overthrow the Cuban government because Cuba was nationalizing industries and moving towards socialism. Another one is Operation Condor. That's a rough one. Pretty coordinated right-wing governments across South America were campaigning against leftists and political dissent. A big one that's relevant right now, the 1953 coup against Iran because they were trying to nationalize their oil industry. Even Operation Northwoods. Operation Northwoods, they proposed carrying out terrorist attacks on Miami, and they were going to lie and blame it on Cuba so that they could justify going to war with Cuba. They were going to kill innocent Americans in the name of preventing socialism and communism. And now when we ask ourselves, what does the United States have to lose to communism or socialism? Everything. money, control, access. Like in Guatemala, it was the fruit company. In Iran, it was the oil. In Chile, it was the mining interests. In Cuba, it was sugar and other American investments. When a country nationalizes industries, those industries are no longer controlled by private corporations or foreign investors. The profits that originally flowed into American companies and shareholders are redirected toward the country itself. So whether those governments succeeded or failed is a separate debate, but the threat to American business interests was very real. And that shifts the conversation kind of away from ideology. Like, it doesn't really matter whether you agree with socialism or communism. It kind of shifts towards economics. And something that's very important to note is that none of this just happened like in a vacuum. While interventions were happening abroad, Americans at home were being taught to view communism through a very specific lens. During the Cold War, Americans were raised in a culture of intense anti-communism messaging. School children were taught duck and cover drills in preparation for possible Soviet nuclear attacks. In fact, I actually just called my grandmother before filming this video. She was born in 1954, and I asked her about it. She remembers what she said they called them air raid drills. And she said she remembers them all through elementary and middle school. And she said that they would sometimes have the students get underneath their desks and cover their heads, and other times they would line them up against the lockers and have them cover their heads. The federal government actually even produced an educational film featuring a character called Bert the Turtle to teach children what to do in the event of a nuclear strike. So looking back, it's not really hard to question what these drills were actually accomplishing, right? Because if a nuclear weapon had truly detonated nearby, hiding under a desk or standing against a locker offers essentially no protection. To me, it seems like the drills did more than prepare people for an emergency. They helped create essentially this generation of people associating communism with fear, with nuclear annihilation, with essentially just this giant existential threat to their way of life. So when people say communism or socialism never works, it's worth asking how much of that belief comes from studying those systems directly and how much of it comes from decades of Cold War propaganda. So I'm going to close out my video with saying this because I'm definitely running out of time here. But if we're going to talk about socialism and communism in terms of success as a capitalist society, you should definitely define what success means to you, because most capitalists will define success as like corporate profits, GDP growth, stock market growth. Communists and socialists will more than likely define success as like universal housing, universal healthcare, literacy, food security, life expectancy, worker power. You're measuring success by capitalist standards, so of course socialism or communism is going to sound like it's going to fail. So essentially what I'm saying is, instead of posing the question of whether or not socialism or communism works, you should examine who each system works for. Because when you have wealthy capitalists telling you that socialism and communism doesn't work, does it not work, or does it not work for them and their wealth? Of course, communism and socialism is a direct threat to wealthy people and corporations. But does that mean it doesn't work, or does it not work for them? Okay, so I believe that AI is creating a new subtype of propaganda that we need to be worrying about. I've named it, and I'm going to give you a little bit of information that I feel like is relevant. I've named it saturation propaganda, because when we think about like traditional propaganda, we usually think about like somebody trying to convince you to believe something specific, like vote for this politician, support this war, hate this group. Traditional propaganda has a clear narrative it wants you to accept, but with saturation propaganda, it works differently. The goal is not to convince you that one thing is true. The goal is to oversaturate or like overflood the information environment with so much conflicting, fake, manipulated, AI generated content that we as a society stop believing in truth altogether. Every video is fake, every source is biased, every image is AI, every statistic is manipulated, every article is propaganda, every person in the comment section is a bot. Eventually, people will become so overwhelmed that they will stop trying to figure out what is real. That is the propaganda. And obviously, the issue with this is that when you have a population that no longer believes that truth exists, they are significantly easier to manipulate. And we're seeing this already, right? One of the outcomes I think saturation propaganda could create is the rise of authoritarianism and the death of evidence culture. With AI, we're creating a society where people are going to be psychologically conditioned to distrust everything. Every institution is corrupt. Every journalist is lying. Every tragedy is staged. Every protest is fake. Every statistic is manipulated. Every piece of evidence is propaganda. The belief that truth itself is just absolutely unreachable, because once people stop believing that objective truth exists, authoritarian politics become way easier to normalize, because historically, confusion and instability can create environments where people become more willing to hand power over to strong authority figures who promise certainty or change. Not because people suddenly want a dictator, but because certainty feels psychologically comforting in chaotic information environments. And I think we're already seeing parts of this happening politically right now. We see criticism against the Trump administration is immediately called fake news, propaganda, AI generated, biased, out of context, or part of some like coordinated attack. But at the same time, both Republicans and Democrats are consuming massive amounts of misinformation from algorithms that prioritize outrage over accuracy. So eventually people are going to stop evaluating evidence entirely. They just are deciding which side they emotionally trust more. And that's dangerous, because once evidence culture dies, accountability is going to die with it. Videos will no longer matter because they can be dismissed as edited. Audio recordings will no longer matter because they could be AI. Documents no longer matter because everything can be made on your computers. Journalism is no longer going to matter because every outlet is automatically going to be assumed corrupt by somebody. We are moving towards a society where evidence itself is losing social power. And when people no longer believe evidence can prove anything, power stops being about facts and starts being about who controls the loudest narrative. And we're already living in the early stages of this. So now it's like, what do we do, right? Like, that sounds fucking terrible. How do we fix it? So there's a few different things I'm going to touch on for fixing this issue. Media literacy and AI detection. People need to understand how misinformation is spreading, how algorithms manipulate engagement, how your emotional reactions are overriding your critical thinking, how to verify sources before we immediately share content. We need to normalize slowing down before reacting, because right now the internet rewards speed, outrage, emotional impulsiveness. People will see something shocking or sad or crazy and repost it within 30 seconds without ever even checking if it was real. But in an AI-saturated information environment, waiting before reacting is going to become a form of protection for ourselves. Verify before you amplify. Another big issue: corporate media consolidation. I think something close to like 80% of American media is controlled by just like 4 corporations. No, you cannot trust CNN. No, you cannot trust Fox News. Those are the people you should be most skeptical of. A small number of corporations having enormous influence over public information should concern everybody, regardless of your political affiliation. But my point being, do not trust big news outlets. People need to start valuing local journalism, trusted communities, direct relationships, independent investigative reporting, firsthand experiences more heavily. Another possible solution: AI watermarking and verification systems for like synthetic media. Now, obviously that's way more complicated than it sounds, because people can remove watermarks, manipulate files, bypass systems, technology evolves constantly. I'm not pretending I personally have the technical solution for that. I'm not that smart. But I do think future verification systems are going to become incredibly important. I also think that we need transparency laws around AI-generated content. If something is AI-generated, whether it is political advertisements, bots, videos, images, deepfakes, synthetic propaganda systems, there should be disclosure requirements. And when I say synthetic propaganda systems, I mean like large-scale automated systems that are designed to manipulate public opinion using AI-generated media, fake engagement, emotional outrage campaigns, bots pretending to be people, mass-produced misinformation, okay? I also think there should be restrictions specifically around political deepfakes, AI impersonation, mass bot campaigns, because those technologies can absolutely destabilize public trust if it's left completely unchecked. We need to encourage long-form thinking again. We are becoming a society that's addicted to instant reactions, rage bait, short clips, outrage cycles, content consumption. And honestly, if you've made it this far in the video, you are actually practicing a form of long thinking, because all of my videos are intentionally designed to make people pause, question things, think critically, and sit with uncomfortable ideas instead of just consuming outrage for 30 seconds and scrolling away. I do not want people to blindly agree with me. I want people to think deeply, because I genuinely believe that one of the only ways we are going to survive an era of what I have now named saturation propaganda is by rebuilding our critical thinking, rebuilding our patience, being skeptical without being paranoid, and the ability to engage with information thoughtfully instead of emotionally.
All right, we're finally out of the house into nature. Let's take a little break, take a little breather. Breathe with me. Okay. Putting my toes in the water, you know, recharging, right? Talking to Gaia, talking to nature, trying to heal. I can't stop crying. So yeah, I needed to get out of the house, and I love to give reading energies, and I will. It's just that these moments of like nature and pause, and I feel guilty about it, because a lot of people is just not doing what we're supposed to be doing. Like, more of the content that I'm going to be adding here is going to be about Sudan and Congo as well. We need to talk about this. So Sudan also report was out on the same day that the Palestinian report was out on June 23rd. And I'm one of those people who are like, oh, Palestine, and I had no idea that that happened in Sudan. Oh my God, I'm surrounded by fishes. Look, they want to kiss my feet. Oh my goodness. Hi, hello. Oh my goodness. There's so many. Oh my goodness. There's so many. And, oh my God, it tickles. Just a little joys. Little joys. I also found...
I've never seen.
You look at here.
Yeah, I just never seen.
How do you call it? Oh my goodness. Snails? Snails. Black snails. I've never seen one.
It's beautiful.
So what I saw, I was like, wow, the wonders of this world, the magic. We still don't understand it.
We'll get there eventually.
We still don't want to like protect it and defend it and do whatever we can. Whatever is necessary to protect not only the oppressed, but our own planet as well. You know, your mother. A lot of you have a toxic relationship with mothers. It's okay. As long as you have self-reflection and you acknowledge this and you don't hurt other people, you don't harm others, and you acknowledge your own, you take accountability, you keep going, okay? Show others how to also hold yourself accountable as well, okay? So yeah, I did not see, and that's why I was like, oh my God, and I felt like super sad. There's so much violence in Sudan, and it's not being reported. That's who I noticed that the usual report that I get on Telegram has slowed down. So I was like, why is he or she reporting anymore? What's happening? Like, they must be going through some trouble to, like, there's definitely some resistance in that energy, you know? And that's why I was like, okay, no, we have to take part. We have to push the algorithm to talk about also their genocide that is happening in Sudan that is backed by the RSF, and UAE is funding this, and nobody's talking about it. Research the Rwanda genocide, okay, start with there, and then read books about this. Like, we really have to all do this to the colonization so that we know how these people lie to us, because this whole system is built of pathological, lying, narcissists, crazy sadists, and demonic energy. Psychotic, right? Serial criminals, you're watching it, you're seeing it, like, you can't deny it anymore. So a lot of you, I see the fear, but his fear is like, even with the fear, you have to defeat this energy. They know it. This is why they're trying to, like, change laws and stuff like that to protect themselves, to not be held accountable, to continue doing a horrendous thing and not be punished or be held accountable, which at this point it feels like for some people it feels like a joke, like, okay, the UN and all that it created a ripple effect. Whether we like to believe it or not, it really pisses off these demonic Zionist people, okay?
If you're living in the United States right now, like, give me 2 minutes of your time, don't scroll. Do you all know what's going on in Sudan right now? Like, y'all seen it across your timelines. Folks are dying left and right, but this is what you can do to help. The RSF, a paramilitary group responsible for a lot of these atrocities in Sudan, is currently sieging 𝓂𝓁̓�ျ𝓞𝓢, wanting to commit the same genocide they did in 𝓂𝓂̓ again. But they're not acting alone. The UAE is acting as a resource for them, providing them a network of supplies, arms, etc. to continue continue committing these atrocities they're doing. And this is where you come in. I need you to contact your local officials and tell them to support the Stand Up for Sudan Act. Call them, DM them, be under their post, go to their IG. This is 21st century. Everybody's got an Instagram. Go find their Instagrams, DM them, text them, tell them to support this, please.
This week in humanitarian news, Doctors Without Borders investigation finds exploitation by staff in Chad. So your own employees are exploiting and abusing locals, refugees, Sudanese refugees who have fled to Chad, and you have no idea. This is the kind of predatory behavior that international aid organizations are engaging in on the African continent. It is a pattern. It is not a one-off. It is not an isolated incident. It is a pattern, and I'll show you. From 2021, WHO horrified over exploitation by aid workers in DR Congo. They are predators. From 2020, aid workers accused of abuse in DRC. In addition to all of the sexual exploitation that we know of going on in the DRC, you have international aid workers coming in to cause this kind of harm, to do even more damage to our communities. This is why as African people, we must fight for our self-reliance, our self-determination. MSF, who are the same organization, Doctors Without Borders, this is their French acronym, Médecins Sans Frontières, they said that they began the investigation in 2024 and found the Sudanese refugees as well as a number of Chad and MSF staff were exploited and abused. So exploitation and abuse is going on under your watch because you are not judiciously vetting your own employees. How do we know that you are not letting RSF militia cosplay aid workers? The organization said it found cases where female refugees, including underage girls, were prostituted. In one case, 7 refugee girls allegedly hired as daily workers were put into an MSF vehicle. So an MSF vehicle, an official international aid organization vehicle, is being used to traffic underage girls and you have no idea. And by the time these reports are coming out, you know that the situation on the ground, the reality on the ground is 100 times worse because these reports are always watered down. They are extremely sanitized. They were told that they were going to water distribution and construction sites. However, the girls were taken to a different location and exposed to abuse. This is what is going on the African continent. People are coming in. They are preying on our already vulnerable communities. We have to continue to fight for our self-determination. Sudanese activists and community leaders are calling on us to call for a U.S. arms embargo on the UAE.
And that for a lot of us is a lot of like, yeah, bitch, out of all the evil that you do, out of all the bullying and horrendous stuff that you're doing to the West Bank in Palestine, look at my Telegram, look at all the videos, look at what they're doing, the violence, and then they expect us all to just sit down and quiet and not do anything. Allow the abuser continue to abuse. And then every time they fear-monger you, they blackmail you for some of you, there's a lot of that energy too. When I'm channeling, I don't need cards to know what divine spirit, I'll just tune in, have meditation, give spirit consent. I have to also understand that they are very respectful, not like this system that like to take and do things out of your consent. They like to make it aware, and they don't intervene unless you want to. A lot of us, we want to intervene. Yeah, bring justice. Yeah, we want that back. Redistribution and return of wealth, and I don't give a shit. We want equality. We want the end of like all this oppressive corporation and privatization. Like, we're done. This is finished. It has to be finished. A lot of us, most of us who do this type of work, we want this to stop. We don't want to be, what the fuck? We don't want people to suffer. What the hell? In pain and wars, death, massacre, murder. A lot of you, that's what they're trying to, that's colonization for you. That's capitalism, normalization of murder, genocide. Is that that's called? A lot of you, I show you that on Telegram, you're still like, oh, but you still find excuses, huh? You still find justification. What is it? A lot of you you lack conscience. And then we have all these uneducated people just like talking kakalaka, and you're like, okay. And we have to deal with their feelings also. We can't hurt their feelings. But it's legal for them to be violent towards you, tell you defamation of character, try to ruin your careers, your finances, trying to like make you like the horrible bad guy for speaking the truth and exposing these motherfuckers, demonic energy. Parásito. Cobardes.
I'm an American, and sometimes I make videos telling other people around the world the reality of life in the United States, and they're always really surprised. And the number one question I get is, how do you guys afford to pay for all this stuff? And some people think it's actually affordable for us because we don't pay a lot in taxes. But this is actually not as true as you think it is. We actually pay more in taxes on average than other OECD countries. Those are like capitalist countries in the global north. So this is actually a chart from 2017. Obviously, numbers have changed a little. And you can see the United States is actually above the average threshold. Obviously, it's not as high as Belgium or Germany or Denmark or what have you, but it's higher than places like Spain, like Ireland, like Sweden, the countries where a lot of people who are surprised by our expenses actually live and come from. So whenever people see this, the next question they ask is, well, don't you guys make a lot more money than we do? And it is true, our income does tend to be higher than yours. But when you look at our expenses, I'm going to show you something. Currently, the median weekly personal income for an American is around $1,200. This breaks down to around $62,000 a year. Now, our average federal tax rate is around 14.5% for most people. And on top of that, most states, you pay a state income tax as well. There are 9 states where you don't have any state income tax. They just have more sales tax and property taxes. But the most populous state in the United States where I live, California, odds are if you ask an American where they're from, they're going to say California if they have to pick a state, right? Because we have the most people. We're on average paying around 8% in annual income taxes. So around 22.5% is what the average American expect to pay. And that's not necessarily counting Social Security contributions. Social Security is like our version of a pension. It's very, very small. It doesn't give you enough money, and we're not even sure if it will still exist by the time millennials and Gen Z are adults, but we still pay into it. So that means our average take-home pay per month is around $4,000 for a typical American. It's actually more of a median than an average. Half people make more than this, half people make less, but we'll go with a median. Now, right out of the gate, your expenses here are going to be higher. The average rent for an apartment in the United States is $1,750. So that leaves you with around $2,300 after rent's paid. Then you have to pay your health insurance. Health insurance costs an average of $497 per month. The older you get, the more expensive it is. Okay, so that drops your income down to around $1,770. But then because we don't have public transit infrastructure here, you're going to have a car. We'll say you don't have a new car. We'll say you have a used car. The average monthly payment for a used car is $531. Now you're working with around $1,200 a month. And like $1,000 of that you wouldn't have to pay if you lived in another country that just had public transportation and free healthcare. Then our phone bills are a lot higher than the rest of the world. Our phone bills are an average of $141 a month, and our internet's an average of $73 a month. So that drops you down to around $1,024 after all that's paid. Then you got to pay your electric bill. That's an average of $163 a month. That leaves you with around $860. And then your average grocery cost here around $365. So that leaves you with $496 after all of your essentials are paid at the end of the month. This is the median American. So remember, half of Americans have less than this left over at the end of the month. Half have more, but half have less. So what can you do with your $496 of living money every single month? Well, hopefully not going to the hospital, because even with health insurance, you're going to spend around $646 out of pocket for an emergency room visit. It's all of your money for the month and more. That's probably why 90% of Americans have debt. And the leading cause of bankruptcy is actually healthcare costs. So no, the average American cannot afford these things. We can't afford our lives. We are kept in a perpetual state of debt. Now you might be wondering, okay, where's all your tax money going then? What do you pay your taxes for? Well, 45% of our tax money goes directly to the military. Either current operations or past operations. Why, you might ask? Well, it's so we can force your countries into submission to make corporations and billionaires in our country richer. Let's say you have a natural resource and you don't want to do a trade deal with the United States for it. Next thing you know, the U.S. military is showing up at your door, going knock knock, hand it over, demanding you do regime change or a coup. Now there's a new leader in charge of your country who's a little bit more sympathetic to the United States business deals and is more likely to not nationalize key resources, to do key deals with Western countries. And our military is not just our military. You also have to remember it is espionage. We meddle in your elections. We run our own candidates in your elections, and we pay money for massive propaganda campaigns and advertising campaigns to make you like our candidates. And then you vote for our candidates and you feel like you voted for who you wanted to win, but you didn't. You voted for who we wanted to win in your country. And then the directors of our CIA get on the news and laugh about it. Do you meddle in the elections in other countries? They laugh. Well, yeah, but it's always for the good of Western interests. And the wild thing is all this money we spend on the military, it's not even necessarily going to give us the most advanced technology. 7 consecutive audits have been failed by our military. Billions of dollars in fraud has been confirmed by our military. Why? Where's this money going? To buy weapons from private corporations who are owned or who are staffed predominantly by key donors of our politicians. Our politicians take our tax money that should be going to pay for things like schools and healthcare and public transit, and they sign buddy-buddy deals with the leaders of private weapons companies. And the guys who run the weapons companies, they don't even give us good products. They charge us sometimes hundreds of dollars for nuts and bolts that retail for like 12 cents on the open market. Our politicians continue to do deals with them. Why? Because they pay our politicians come election season. They pay for their campaigns. They pay for them to run to get reelected so they can continue this cycle of giving them the good deals. However corrupt you think the United States is, it's worse. And the American public is completely brainwashed and propagandized into believing it's not that bad, or more often, that it's actually good, that it's actually a better system than where you live. When I make videos showing other people around the world the reality of what it's like under American capitalism, I'm not actually making those videos for you guys. I'm making those videos for other Americans to see your horrified comments, for other Americans to see that this system is not normal. I want other Americans to wake up and get mad. And for those of you in other countries, I want you to understand that your capitalist ruling class wants to turn your country into ours. They want to privatize your healthcare. They want to invest more in military spending. They want to deregulate everything. Do not let them.
So the Strait of Hormuz is closed again, or not, depends on who you ask, but if it's not already, it's going to be, because the memorandum of understanding that was signed last week has already been violated in multiple ways by the usual suspects. Our President Trump was told not to make threats. Like, that was one of the key aspects of this memo, and he's already done it. And also the state that attacks and terrorizes everybody has already begun doing that again. So yeah, I don't imagine the peace will hold. You know what's funny about this is that this is a surprise to no one. Everyone expected this outcome except perhaps for President Trump, who said, I can control the state that terrorizes and attacks everybody. They listen to me. They will not do that again. And then they did that again. It reminds me of the parable of the frog and the scorpion. Have you ever heard this one? A scorpion asks for a frog to get help to go across a pond. And the frog goes, no, I'm not giving you help to go across the pond. You're just going to sting me. And the scorpion says, come on, man. No, I'm not going to sting you, because if I sting you, then you'll drown and then I'll drown. And the frog goes, you're right. You would be crazy to sting me. Hop on my back. Halfway across the pond, the scorpion stings the frog. And the frog, while he's dying, says, why? Why did you do it? And the scorpion says, 'cause I'm a scorpion, dude. That's what we do. There is a state in the Middle East that ever since it was established, even before it was established, only knew how to create violence and terror and rape and theft. It cannot help itself. So anybody who says, hey, maybe they can change, maybe we can have peace, they're delusional. Peace is actually even the scarier thing, because peace is a temporary pause between aggressions. Peace is the time when they're plotting, scheming, reloading so that they can fire again. So peace is not really what you want. You would like an ultimate end to the hostilities. You would ultimately like justice. But in order for things to go back to normal, that state cannot exist in its current format. This violent, genocidal, nuclear-armed apartheid state, they need to not be that any longer. Because as long as they're that, they will attack. It doesn't matter if it destroys them. It doesn't matter if it destroys their chief funder, America. It doesn't matter if it destroys the economy of the world, which is what the closure of the Strait of Hormuz long-term is going to do. They know that. They don't care. They are predictably uncreative about their approach, which is always violence, theft, rape, murder, and lying about it. That's just what they are.
Mayor 𓂀𓁧𓁞𓁢, this is a message for you. Do you remember when you said this?
As mayor, New York City would arrest Benjamin Netanyahu. This is a city that Our values are in line with international law. It's time that our actions are also.
Well, now I'm sure you've already heard that Itamar Ben-Gvir is planning to visit New York next month for one of the most oxymoronic conferences, if I've ever heard one. The United Nations Policing Conference, otherwise known as the UN COP Summit. And get this, under the title, Investing in Peace, the conference will take place July 7th and 8th, and we'll see security ministers and police chiefs around the world discussing strengthening international peace, security, and development for all through national and transnational police forces. Aside from cops being the literal arms of the oppressive authoritarian systems we are precisely trying to fight, I have to ask what the actual fuck the United Nations is trying to achieve here, especially by extending an invitation to a terrorist apartheid ethno-state currently enacting a genocide. A terrorist ethno-state that trains cops from all over the world to use oppressive, brutal violence and murder against ethnic minorities to establish their law and order. A terrorist ethno-state that was blacklisted by the UN itself twice. Once in 2024 for the systemic and purposeful harm and murder of children in conflict zones, and one this year for the systemic rape and sexual violence enacted on the Palestinian people. With international investigations currently underway for the rapes Israeli soldiers enacted on foreign nationals on the latest humanitarian flotilla mission. Rapes, torture, and abuse that this piece of shit celebrated and paraded on videos that he posted himself for the whole world to see. The same piece of shit that the even worse than Hitler terrorist himself, Benjamin Netanyahu, had to publicly condemn, not because it was wrong, but because of the PR nightmare he caused. The same piece of shit that not only celebrates the rape and torture of Palestinian hostages, but was one of the main government officials to push for the Israeli gang rapists caught on video raping a Palestinian to walk free. The same piece of shit that spearheaded the law to execute Palestinian hostages via hanging and celebrated its passing with a news cake given to him by his terrorist wife and his terrorist children. The same piece of shit that openly celebrated the death of a Palestinian baby, 18-month-old Ali 𝓂𝓁𝓞𝓢, back in 2015, as he praised the disgusting, filthy, inbred Israeli settler, murderer, Amiram Ben Olel, that killed baby Ali by burning him alive along with his parents. The same piece of shit that has a history of 8 criminal convictions, including a 2007 conviction for incitement to racism, whom was also a part of the 𝓂𝓁 and 𝓂𝓁𝓞𝓢, which were both outlawed by the Israeli government and designated as foreign terrorist organizations by the United States. The same piece of shit that has openly called for the genocide of the Palestinians, the illegal thievery and invasion of Palestinian land, and provided weapons to terrorist Israeli settlers to terrorize and kill Palestinians to help achieve their continued land invasion with the support and protection of Israeli occupation soldiers and police that he sends. The same piece of shit that just publicly called for the entirety of Lebanon to burn. The same piece of shit that the highest court on the planet, the ICC, is currently seeking an arrest warrant for. The same piece of shit that publicly spits on the United Nations time and time and time again. And this piece of shit still has the opportunity to just waltz on into a United Nations event to lecture the world on international policing. The fact that the UN allows Israel to even exist, let alone have a seat at the table, is what delegitimizes the UN as a completely useless entity only meant to keep the global south in check. That and the fact that the UN is the reason Israel ever came to be in the first place. But I'm not here to speak to the UN. They should be embarrassed, as it is, from everything I just mentioned. But I'm here to speak to you, Mamdani. It is pretty clear that Itamar Ben-Gvir is one of the most dangerous terrorists on the face of this earth, if not the most dangerous. And not only does he not care that the entire international community collectively feels this way, but he openly flaunts and laughs about it to the world. So here's what I have to say to you. Sure, you are miles better than any mayor to ever step foot in those shoes in the history of New York City. But that doesn't mean much if you maintain the status quo against the systemic oppression and dehumanization of our people. You have made quite a few major mistakes thus far that I personally will have a hard time coming back from, such as condemning Palestinian resistance, visiting a terrorist rabbi's gravesite in his honor and to appease the Zionist community, sending a record number of armed police and security to protect quite literally the largest and most dangerous threats to our society at the Israel Day Parade. And last but certainly not least, not firing one of the most dangerous Zionists to ever exist in New York City, your police commissioner, Jessica Tisch. Now, the fact that a United Nations police summit even exists in the first place is laughable in itself, in the most dark humor kind of way. But one, if you send Jessica Tisch, the most staunchly pro-Israel parasite, who is part of the family that is known to be one of the largest financial contributors to Israel's very existence, to that police summit, You will essentially be a complicit party to the oppression of people like us worldwide. And two, if you do not arrest Ben-Gvir upon his first step onto New York soil, let alone allow him to travel anywhere near here at all, you might as well call yourself a Zionist. Plain and simple. Your move, Mamdani. We are watching.
We demand that apartheid Israel be suspended from the UN system, including the UNFCCC and COP processes, as apartheid South Africa was also once isolated. A state committing genocide, apartheid, and ecocide cannot be treated as normal participants in climate negotiations. We demand that military and war-related emissions be fully included in climate accounting, especially as war can no longer remain outside the numbers while its destruction is lived in our lands, in our waters, and in our people's bodies for generations. We demand a real conflict of interest policy in the UNFCCC to exclude fossil fuels, arms, and apartheid-linked corporations from influencing climate negotiations. We demand that climate finance, including loss and damage, adaptation, and just transition funding, must not flow through or benefit entities complicit in violations of international law. And we demand direct, safe access to climate finance for Palestinian communities and institutions without political conditioning, normalization requirements, or greenwashed reconstruction schemes. Importantly, this is to our martyrs. Your name, your legacy, and your personhood live on forever. They live in all of us and continue. It is the responsibility we all bear and must uphold in every session and in every convening. We will not let their deaths be invisibilized by the same industry that only counts profits and governance frameworks that create a platform for complicity and impunity. To all our communities defending land, water, air, and protecting each other and our collective futures, from Palestine to Sudan to Colombia to the DRC, you are the lifeblood of our struggle. You are the embers that keep our fire burning. There can be no just transition or climate-safe future without the defense, protection, and rebuilding of our people and lands. All power belongs to the people, and free the land, until liberation and until return.
7 Latin American elections since USAID was defunded. I want you guys to guess what is the one thing that unites every single one of these far-right governments. This is clearly a talking point that's been blasted out by the White House. These little wind-up dolls only talk about things they're told to talk about. You see the same thing over and over again. You know why they're all talking about it. Cirrhosis Diabetes himself is talking about this. When you see CD talking about a topic, you know a blast has gone out. They've been told what to speak on. I'm sure nobody guessed this, but the thing that connects every single one of these governments and more like El Salvador with Bukele is every single one of them supports Israel. He is a Palestinian by means of his dad's parents. Big fan of Israel. Go to the far-right government in Argentina, big Trump guy, big Israel guy, got the Genesis Prize last year. Go to Costa Rica with Laura Fernandez Delgado, the president of Israel, Isaac Herzog, was at her inauguration. You know, Laura is a big supporter of the apartheid state. President of Ecuador, staunch supporter of Israel. Bolivia was really quick to sever ties with the new president. Everything is all good. New president of Honduras is also Palestinian, but he is a far-right Christian Zionist. New president of Chile tells Herzog he wants to restore ties, expand cooperation after sharp deterioration of diplomacy under leftist predecessor. I know you'll never guess this, but it's the same exact story in Peru. Colombia just had their election, which was decided by less than 1 percentage point after having their first leftist president ever. The current president is saying there are massive irregularities in the election data. He is saying that the only country with these cyber capabilities to interfere with their democratic process is Israel. Now, Colombia had severed ties with Israel over the genocide. They also banned exports of coal, and they had joined South Africa's genocide case in the ICJ. Bayardo, the far-right candidate, said he's going to restore ties and move Colombia's embassy to Jerusalem, following along with Milei. Now, this is a man who said as a child he liked tying fireworks to cats and watching them explode, then said his goal was to make the animal fly, did not realize the fireworks would actually explode, and then after the fact he said, oh, I was just joking. Also, a month before the election, singled out a female journalist, made her look at a picture of him with his bulge visible, and said, this is why women are voting for me. Shockingly enough, Trump really likes this guy. So does Netanyahu, who tweeted this morning, friends of Israel keep winning. And the current president tweeted out, "Today we have evidence of a change in IP addresses of several servers of the National Registry. This means the software was compromised and others wrote data for polling stations and voting posts." That's where they said the only entity in the world capable of doing this is the state of Israel. Is passing this all on to the judges to take a look at the software and see exactly what happened. Obviously making this a tense time for the future of Colombia, and Americans should be paying attention to what's happening.
Oh my god, we're gonna go on a journey today. Buckle up. So in my last video, I talked about a guy named Michael, and I want to expand more on Michael's... So Michael has a lengthy history in the concept of Western alienation, driving division in communities, and every bad organization in Canada. He owns multiple different energy things globally, and he is connected directly to a guy named Justin and a woman named Julia, and I've been able to find those three names on multiple corporations. And one thing that this trio started was something called the Modern Miracle Network, which in no way is spreading miracles. They are actually spreading pro-oil and gas propaganda that is not totally scientifically founded. So Michael and team start the Modern Miracle Network in 2018. According to the incorporation document, there's two other versions of this previously. Same shit show, different website. And I was able to find a contract with a gentleman back in 2018 to do some type of work for the Modern Miracle Network. And that gentleman's name is David Parker. As in Take Back Alberta, Danielle Smith, Centurion Project, Tour with Tucker Carlson, David Parker. And that chapter of his life started long before the Take Back Alberta initiative. But that's not even the craziest one. Michael is also connected to a taxpayer federation that was started by Jason Kenney. Michael is also connected to the Canadian Association of Petroleum Producers. He is directly connected to the Manning Foundation, which is different than the Manning Center. The Manning Foundation is Preston Manning's educational arm, and if you look up the address to the Manning Foundation, it's a strip mall in Kelowna, British Columbia with like a KFC. If you go to the Manning Foundation website, it talks about how they are basically building educational tools for all levels of education to perpetuate like their version of values, ethics, principles, opportunities, and tools for participatory democracy. That's not terrifying at all. Any doodle, that's not it. I'm not even close to being done. Michael is also a board member of Canada Strong and Free, which used to be called the Manning Center, but was forced to change its name after they were caught purchasing access to small town Facebook groups and spreading disinformation. Canada Strong and Free has an entire platform, an entire policy dedicated to onboarding social media content creators, giving them a platform, giving them a voice, and giving them access to key members of the Conservative Party. Canada Strong and Free regularly platforms Michael, Pierre, and Stephen. But wait, there's more. In this cacophony of organization that Michael's connected to, a woman named Susan Riddle Rose is also connected. You probably don't remember Susan, but you for sure remember Sequoia. Sequoia was arguably one of the worst deals that we've ever seen in Alberta, where an oil and gas company was allowed to off-book all of its bad, yucky, gross stuff, sell it to another company for $1, and then that company abandoned all of it to the Orphan Well Association, and now we, as taxpayers, need to clean it up. Anyways, those assets all came from Susan's companies. This next part is just circumstantial. There is a piece of Michael's business that is anchored in Quebec that was attempting to access key extraction that the government was not allowing him to access. And he may or may not have had a whole lot of things to say about Quebec separation. And he may or may not be citing a lot of those criticisms in his articles that he's writing about Alberta separation. But wait, there's more! When Stephen Harper left office in 2015, he started a company called, actually he started it before he left office, Harper and Associates. Now, while in office, Stephen Harper wrote a fun little rule on the books to say that no one who is exiting from government was allowed to start lobbying inside Canada. But they were allowed to start lobbying outside of Canada. And that's exactly what Michael's energy company hired Harper and Associates to do. Michael's energy company hired Stephen Harper and Harper and Associates to go abroad and advocate for their energy projects, specifically an energy project that was happening in Jordan. Stephen's whole job was to advocate and advise on this relationship between this oil and gas company and the Jordanian government. In comes a new fun character named Bruno, who served as Stephen Harper's head of security, like his personal bodyguard for 5 years, who left that role to become the ambassador to the Jordanian and Iraq governments, respectively. What? So Michael and Stephen are KISSINGing internationally. Okay, so Stephen's out of office. He's gallivanting around the world, advocating on behalf of his best friends' businesses, using his international Rolodex to get favorable contracts for his besties. So Stephen has this consulting firm that has a 5-year moratorium on it to say that they're not allowed to operate within Canada. And as soon as that moratorium is up, he takes contracts with the Alberta government, the Saskatchewan government, and appears to be doing some fuck shit in Ontario. Any doodle, back to Michael. Michael is connected to all of the things that are perpetuating disinformation in Canada. There is so much overlap between him and the network of influence that is happening in the United States. The perpetuation of the separatist agenda is very clearly part of Michael's rhetoric and history. He is argued as one of the first key voices in the Western alienation movement. He's a board member of an organization that has been caught buying access to social media spaces. He's been accused of not so good there things. He has businesses all of the places, and he has an established and lengthy history with former Prime Minister Stephen Harper. Michael is connected to the Atlas Network, which is connected to the Heritage Foundation. It's the same cesspool. It's the same polluted tailing pond. Now, before he got into energy and disinformation, Michael worked for a company called Ernst & Young, specifically in their tax area, because by trade, he's a chartered accountant. And if you go down the rabbit hole of Ernst & Young, you will find a number of articles about how they were contracted to look into Jeffrey Epstein's history. But when you look at the actual Epstein files, you will find that they were working together. They were working together. And it looks to me like Ernst & Young was doing some tax stuff specifically for Epstein. Oh, and Michael was on the Alberta Next panel. Yeah, that failed conundrum. So let's summarize this so we can all wrap our head around it. This guy, Michael, has been fucking around in energy since the 1980s. He's got a lengthy history of perpetuating this idea of Western alienation. He has financial ties to Quebec. He is a board member of multiple entities that are purposely spreading disinformation in relation to the energy sector on a global scale. He hired a former Prime Minister of Canada to advocate and consult on international relationships. That former Prime Minister's security guard became the ambassador to the country he specifically hired Stephen Harper to advocate to. He appears to be advocating in Indigenous spaces in a very entryism, destabilize-y kind of way. The Canada Strong and Free Network regularly platforms Michael, Stephen, Pierre, all of them. Michael has a lengthy history with Stephen Harper. David Parker worked on Stephen Harper's campaign. Michael gave him a job with one of these nonprofit organizations. The amount of is crazy. Oh, and Michael has a bank. He has a whole investment company that he started. And I would really like some help to gain access to some information, and I need some moolah to do it. So if you could hit subscribe, I would really appreciate it, because I do enjoy being a problem for all of these organizations. But it's very expensive. So yeah, that's the crazy story of Michael and how he is connected to all of the gross, yucky, terrible things. But you know what? I am probably wrong, and the Harper and Associates and Stephen J. Harper that are listed in the Epstein files are totally not the one tied to Canada. Because that Stephen J. Harper and his best friend Michael are totally not perpetuating disinformation and working internationally on a scale and scope that we can't even imagine. It's probably just a really crazy coinkydink, but it sure would be nice if the Canadian government looked into this. Right? That'd be cool. I'd like that.
If you need another reason to oppose an AI data center popping up in your neighborhood, well, check out how Israel lobbyists are using AI.
We're finding that these chatbots and the text-to-image models are increasingly showing us exactly what the companies want us to see, okay? So it's becoming intentional, which means that instead of trying to control the whole world and trying to somehow manage what's happening in this big blob of Wikipedia and social media, we can go directly to the companies with clear technical and advocacy solutions. So for the first time, there's a path to correcting the digital world.
They aren't even hiding the fact that they're pressuring AI companies to push their agenda. And in fact, that's already happening.
We're in regular contact with the major AI companies, and I'm proud to share making a difference. Last year, we showed OpenAI how its new video generation AI tool, Sora, made it easy to create anti-Semitic videos. Sora now refuses to generate videos around several of the specific concepts that we discussed and shared.
That was the CEO of the ADL, one of the most powerful pro-Israel lobby groups in the whole world, bragging about successfully manipulating OpenAI. And last year, Israel signed a $6 million contract with a firm linked to a former Trump campaign manager to influence how AI chatbots like ChatGPT and Claude respond to questions about Palestine. But AI is not just being used by Zionists for propaganda. Israel also uses AI extensively on the battlefield to surveil, target, and kill Palestinians. And that's why experts have called Gaza the world's first AI-powered genocide. And one of the companies that's building massive AI data centers here in Australia, Amazon, is directly implicated in the murders in Gaza. In 2021, Amazon and Google signed up to Project Nimbus, a deal to provide the IDF and the Israeli government with cloud computing and AI infrastructure. That infrastructure helps process huge amounts of surveillance data on Palestinians, and it helps to generate kill lists at industrial scale. So guess what? That creepy AI data center that's being built in your neighborhood, the one that's going to use enormous amounts of energy and water, the one that's going to raise temperatures and create constant noise, it won't just be producing harmless AI slop. It will be part of the same global AI industry that's being used to whitewash genocide, suppress dissent, and enable the mass killing of Palestinians.
You know that thing where people keep saying that AI is inevitable?
You feel like it's inevitable.
Is inevitable.
There's an inevitability with this kind of technology.
Well, it's a classic tactic of psychological manipulation by authoritarian oppressors. To understand why these people keep doing this exceedingly annoying thing, we have to go back to 1974. The disco is bumping, Nixon is president, Muhammad Ali is at the height of his game, and neoliberalism is almost baked to perfection. And on October 12th, Business Week quotes a corporate boss who says this: "Nothing in modern history compares with the difficulty of the selling job that must now be done to make people accept a new reality. The idea that they will have to do with less so that big business can have more." Well, it turns out they didn't really have to argue for anything. Margaret Thatcher could even come along and say the quiet part out loud. Whether you're slashing social services or violently crushing unions, there is no alternative.
If you can't beat them, join them.
AI is here, and it's here to stay.
You cannot be left behind. Of course, the only people who say there is no alternative are the same people who are actively destroying the other alternatives. You can't organize in a union because we've destroyed your union. You can't avoid using AI to search something because we've destroyed the option of using your search engine as a fucking search engine. You don't have to try to argue the merits of your position. Instead, you convince everybody that it's inevitable. It's already here.
So you either get on board or you get left in the past.
And to avoid it means certain starvation and death.
Sentient AI is essentially inevitable.
Super sentient AI, yeah.
It's time, people. Which brings us to the really crazy thing here.
AI is an insanely enormous wave that is coming right at you.
The sense of doom that it takes in order for this tactic to work is built into AI.
You have one of two options. Option one, you are going to put your head in the sand.
That doom is a fundamental part of how we conceive of AI. Everybody knows that it's accelerating all of these different possible ways that the world could end. And that's part of the point.
Or two, you are going to grab a surfboard forward, and you will ride the largest wave that has come at us since the internet itself, and you will be highly successful, and you will enjoy the ride.
Because if the world's going to end, why don't we just give in and be as productive as we can in our final days? I'm just kidding. Please don't do that. I'm Isabella. I talk about anti-authoritarian folk art history, and let's resist this together. Follow along to learn more.
Let me fucking tell you something. When your friends post about social injustice, when they post about genocide, police brutality, when they post about war, you're supposed to like it. Not because you like war, genocide, or police brutality, but you're supposed to get that fucking algorithm going. Use your social media like you give a fuck about humanity.
How do some of you, don't think that this is so beautiful to preserve and protect? How could any person with a human capacity think that nature and all that is just something to just extract and take without just reverence? Aren't you grateful? Your mother gives you air for you to breathe. Not looking, judging, or anything like that, but a lot of you, damn. You fear judgment, but it's like, okay, but what are you doing to not be judged? Are you being truthful with integrity? Are you know? I don't know. While you're in gratitude and energy, this is another form of protection for all of y'all. Talk to Mother Gaia. Touch a tree, touch it with your hands, or if you can, with anything, just sit down, ground yourself, 5-10 minutes, doesn't matter. Send energy to the people who are suffering the things that you will never have to suffer. Start with air. Then you feel it. You feel your shield of protection expanded. And it will only work with people with the right heart, obviously. And this is going to piss off a lot of people because a lot of you, you're righteous. Think you're... nobody's perfect. But hold yourself accountable and change. Right? We've seen it. We've seen people change and shift. I don't give a fuck what it was. Oh, nobody can change. Yeah, you can. When you're given the right information and the truth and you're... Yeah. When you know the truth, you act different because you're being convicted. Conviction doesn't mean you're being attacked. Conviction means that the karmic has to be balanced. The justice has to happen. It just has to balance. A lot of people just... This energy is just delaying the unavoidable. Power to the people. Power to Mother Gaia, nature. Give her all the... Be grateful for the little things. A little synchronicity, the little joys. Those fuel you. Fuel you for continue. Who you are, you have to acknowledge it. Psychological warfare. Spiritual warfare. They're real things. It does happen. You have symptoms. There's anxiety. And I'm not a doctor or anything like that. I have to say that. But as a caregiver, I've seen a lot of things that, shift the perspective and makes you more empathetic and more understand more. And you take accountability and acknowledge those things. For example, a lot of us who, I don't know, I consider myself a settler even though I'm indigenous. But a lot of us, we need to honor the places that we are staying, occupying, right? Especially they're not. It's not your land. It never was, but, the energy of normalizing that and continue doing it, it's really pathetic at this point, right? So a lot of you, if you're educated, you feel like an alien or something. You're not. You're just conscious and aware. And you have cognizance, which, if you don't know what that is, Google it. Research it. I'll Google it for you. While I'm editing this. Oh, look how cute. See? A whole family. And I was like, oh, I've never seen dark snails. And here it goes again. I found a whole manada, a whole comunidad.
See how Gaia is? She's so rebellious. I love you so much, baby. Yeah, she's telling you. See? She wants you together. She wants all of you together. Even if it's slow, it's okay. Do it together. Fight together. You have to fight with her. She will let you know when. She's already giving you signs, right? Don't forget about the earthquakes in Venezuela, right? And what's happening in Cuba. Help people. Okay?
Remember this the next time you're afraid to speak. We have pedophiles calling people domestic terrorists. We have pedophile protectors of people who ate children, calling people with moral backbones domestic terrorists for not buying the lies of pedophiles. We have pedophiles telling you that they want to protect you. We have child-eating pedophiles telling you that they're here to protect you. Remember that the next time you feel like you can't speak. Remember that the next time you feel like they might come for you. Remember that the next time they try to pressure you. Are you afraid of pedophiles? You afraid of pedophilic cannibals? I'm not. Are you?
When you pull the trigger of a gun, a small explosion sends the bullet down the barrel. That explosion needs a propellant, a chemical that burns very fast in this confined space. Before the 1900s, armies used gunpowder. Gunpowder works as a propellant, but it produces a huge cloud of white smoke. This meant that every soldier who fired their weapon gave away their position, and the entire battlefield filled up with smoke within minutes. Then, in 1884, a French chemist called 𝓂𝁬𝁸 created a propellant that produced almost no smoke at all. The French never announced publicly what they had created. They just fitted it to a new rifle, the Lebel M1886, and let Europe find out on the battlefield. By 1888, Britain was panicking, so they set up the Explosives Committee. This committee had one job: find out what was in that French rifle and copy it. The head of that committee was Frederick Abel, the War Office's chief chemist. He had been working on gun cotton at the Royal Gunpowder Factory at Waltham Abbey since the 1860s. The chemical base is nitrocellulose. It was made from cotton soaked in nitric acid. This is what made the bullet explosive. You had to keep that stable and then combine it with nitroglycerin. Getting these two chemicals to combine stably, burn predictably, and not detonate the user was a technical problem every European empire was racing to solve. Then in 1887, Alfred Nobel, the man who would later fund the Peace Prize, created his own smokeless propellant. He called it ballistite. Actually, I want to move so you can actually look at this. Nobel's Empire Smokeless Sporting Powder for shotguns. He first tried to sell this to France, but they had their own, so he ended up selling it to Italy. Frederick Abel and his team at the Royal Gunpowder Factory then examined ballistite. They identified what they considered to be a technical flaw, what I consider to be a way around the patent. They reformulated ballistite and produced their own substance, cordite. Cordite is a combination of nitrocellulose, nitroglycerin, and a mineral jelly stabilizer. The British government assigned the patent to the Secretary of State for War on the 24th of June 1890. 2 days after that patent was assigned, the Secretary of State certified that this invention should be kept secret in the public interest. And just as I suspected, they did not find a technical flaw, they found a way around a patent. Nobel also suspected that, and he filed a lawsuit for patent infringement. To produce cordite at scale, you need a lot of acetone. Acetone is a solvent. It's the thing that makes nail varnish remover smell so pungent. In cordite production, it dissolves the nitrocellulose and the nitroglycerin into a workable paste. Acetone is a byproduct of the timber and logging industry. Today, acetone is synthetically manufactured from petrochemicals. In the 1800s, the process required the destructive distillation of hardwood. When large swaths of hardwood trees are felled for lumber, massive volumes of waste wood, stumps and branches are left over. Factories gather up all of that remaining wood and put it in giant sealed oxygen-free ovens and heat it to extreme temperatures. When the vapor is cooled, it condenses into a dark liquid called wood vinegar. and from that you can isolate acetone. Britain did not have enough hardwood trees to fuel this increasing demand for acetone. It had already been through a timber crisis during the Elizabethan era. Industry was consuming forests faster than they could regrow. Coal replaced charcoal in iron smelting in Britain because it had to. It was the only remaining option. Britain deforested itself to build its navy. The war machine consumed its own fuel source. Britain could not produce its own acetone, but Germany could. Germany, before 1914, had three things that Britain did not. It had managed forests, roughly 32% forest cover going into World War I. And crucially, these were managed forests, not wild ones. Germany had invented modern scientific forestry. The discipline called Forstwissenschaft was formalized in the early 19th century by German foresters who had developed the concept of sustainable yield. They understood how much timber you can cut in a year without reducing the total stock of the forest. Britain had burned through all of its forests for charcoal, shipbuilding and potash. It never tried to manage anything as renewable, but Germany did. The second thing was science. By 1914, German firms like BASF and Bayer were producing over 80% of the world's synthetic dyes and 90% of world trade in them. Dyes, pharmaceuticals and explosive precursors all come from the same chemistry infrastructure. Germany had intentionally built a systemic pipeline from university chemistry departments into industrial production. BASF's Haber-Bosch process synthesized ammonia from atmospheric nitrogen. They cracked that in 1909. This is the same reaction that produces fertilizer and explosive feedstock. All those years of Britain using slaves to fertilize manure, and just like that, Germany industrialized the nitrogen cycle itself. There is a quote from Arthur Balfour from 1909, the same year that Germany figured out the Haber-Bosch process. He said, "We are probably fools not to find a reason for declaring war on Germany before she builds too many ships." That's the man who later signed the Balfour Declaration, 5 years before the First World War started, explaining that Britain wanted to destroy Germany's industrial capacity before it became too large to beat. Before 1914, Britain was importing a lot from Germany. All of the acetone came from Germany, and then all the synthetic dyes needed for the textile industry. The wool industry, Britain's big industry, biggest export, was completely dependent on wood ash, potash from Germany. Any pharmaceuticals or pharmaceutical precursors were mostly coming from Bayer at this point. When Britain declared war on Germany on the 4th of August 1914, it cut itself off from that chemical industry, those chemicals that were foundational to the very war effort itself. Nobody makes the decision to go to war with their number one supplier of war industry chemicals without having an alternative supply secured. How the fuck did Britain fight this war if it couldn't get acetone anymore? Chaim Weizmann arrived in Britain from Belarus in 1904. His father was a lumber transporter. They were from a small Jewish settlement near Pinsk in what was then the Russian Empire and is today Belarus. This whole landmass was called the Pale. At this point in history, it was mostly just dense forest, and it was where the Russian Empire had been pushing out the Jews. As a child, Weizmann spent his summers riding his father's log rafts downriver to the Baltic ports. These details are not decorative. They place him deep in the Baltic timber trade. Same forests, same rivers, same economy. He studied the engine. As a Jewish man in the Russian Empire, Weizmann was not allowed to study chemistry, so he left. First he went to Germany, then he went to Switzerland. He studied at the Technical University in Darmstadt and then at the University of Berlin. He completed his doctorate at the University of Fribourg in Switzerland. This is the same German university chemistry system that had produced BASF. He was trained by it. After completing his doctorate, he lectured at the University of Geneva and taught Russian. In 1904, he was invited to come to Owens College in Manchester to work with William Henry Perkins Jr., who was the head of organic chemistry. Perkins Jr. was the son of the man who had discovered synthetic dyes. His father, Perkins Sr., had trained under Adolf von Bayer from Munich, of Bayer. the same German university system. Perkins' lab at Owens College had been modelled on the German research laboratories. Owens College had been created in 1851 at the bequest of John Owens, a Manchester textile merchant. This was a private industrialist money directed at building an institution to serve the specific needs of the industrial class. And the chemistry building where Perkins Jr. worked was funded by 𝓂𝁧𝁞𝁢𝁞𝁢, a German-born British chemist and industrialist. He was the founder of Brunner, Mond and Company, who literally have in their emblem making war material. He was also the founder of the Mond Nickel Company. After he died, these companies were merged with 3 others to form Imperial Chemical Industries. This is the company that would later run Britain's nuclear program. Cleverly disguised nuclear program, Tube Alloys. Weizmann had been brought to the University of Manchester specifically to work on bacterial fermentation. In 1910, Weizmann started working with a consortium called Strange and Graham. Strange and Graham was a group of technical research chemists based in the City of London. Their brief was finding an industrial scale fermentation that would work as an alternative to German wood vinegar. Weizmann had a contact at the Pasteur Institute in Paris. This is the French institution that had already solved the fermentation problem. And he was able to bring the French biochemist Auguste Fernbach into this project with Strange and Graham and identified a Clostridium species that could ferment potato starch into acetone. It worked. And in 1911, Strange and Graham filed a patent in the United States. The inventors named on this patent, US 1044368A, are Auguste Fernbach of Paris, France, and Edward Halford Strange of London, England. By 1912, Strange and Graham were producing acetone at industrial scale using Fernbach's method. And with this plant operational, the British were finally ready to go to war with Germany. The war starts in August. And by November, Strange and Graham's fermentation plant is failing. The bacteria strain that they had got from Fernbach in Paris doesn't work. It is not staying active at industrial scale. Whether Fernbach's strain failed because it was genuinely fragile at industrial scale, or whether someone understood the science and the stakes well enough to ensure that it would fail, is unclear. In March 1915, at the Battle of Neuve-Chapelle, Britain fired more shells in a single 35-minute bombardment than it had in the entire Boer War, and after that, its stocks were functionally gone. Between March and May 1915, British propaganda goes into overdrive. The press creates this whole fantasy that history remembers as the shell crisis. And the shell crisis causes a political crisis. The Times publishes a report by the war correspondent Colonel Repington. The day after this was published, the First Sea Lord Admiral Fisher resigns. His resignation triggers a constitutional crisis. A First Lord, who was Winston Churchill, without a First Sea Lord is unsustainable, especially during a war. And so within a week, Churchill is also fired. The official reason that has always been given for why Churchill was removed is Fisher's departure. But let me tell you what that framing conceals. Churchill was the one most directly responsible for the acetone crisis. Churchill has an on-record relationship with Weizmann that goes back earlier than 1906. Churchill was the First Lord of the Admiralty. It was him who personally issued the orders to the British Army to commence hostilities against Germany in August 1914. He had spent the 3 preceding years building up the British Navy for exactly this war. Building up the Navy had included transitioning them from coal to oil and then clearing the oil corridor from Mesopotamia. While Weizmann was a lecturer at the University of Manchester, Churchill was a Liberal MP in Manchester North West. That constituency had a large, influential Jewish population, specifically in Cheetham Hill area. One of Churchill's biggest campaign donors was the wealthy cotton merchant Harold Lasky. He was also president of the Manchester Great Synagogue and the local Liberal Party campaign chairman. Churchill literally stayed with the Lasky family during his time in this constituency. On the 10th of December 1905, Churchill had stood at a podium in Manchester speaking about the persecution of Russian Jews, with Weizmann by his side on stage. This is evidence that the operational relationship between Churchill and the Zionist community was established long before the war, long before any acetone, long before any crisis. Weizmann was already useful to Churchill's career. For 3 years, Churchill built up the British Navy and then led it into war with its own primary acetone suppliers. The acetone runs out in May 1915. Well, in January 1915, as this shell crisis is already building, Herbert Samuel, who was the only Jewish member of the British cabinet, circulated a memorandum titled "The Future of Palestine." So by April 1915, Churchill is facing a war that he started against suppliers that he depended on, and a political crisis of his own making when guess who walks in to save the day? Hi, M. Weizmann. He blurted out on the spot, "Can you make me 30,000 tons of acetone?" And Weizmann said, yes. That's the story. It's suspicious, isn't it? So Weizmann produces a new strand of bacteria, just like that. And this one is resilient at industrial scale. And on the 24th of May, the day before Parliament would remove Churchill, Weizmann demonstrated that his fermentation process could convert 100 tons of grain into 12 tons of acetone. So the new munitions minister, David Lloyd George, followed Churchill in supporting Weizmann's efforts. Within days, the British state start funding a laboratory at Lister Institute and securing the industrial plants needed to produce acetone at war machine scale. The way that this story gets told by mostly Britain and Israel is that Dr. Weizmann declined to receive any compensation for the patent. Then, in 1916, Lloyd George becomes the Prime Minister, and he appoints Arthur Balfour as his Foreign Secretary. According to David Lloyd George, Weizmann declined any payment, but just asked for the rights to Palestine. And so, on the 2nd of November 1917, Arthur Balfour writes to Lord Rothschild and says His Majesty's government view with favour the establishment in Palestine of a national home for Jewish people. This is the point where you're supposed to hate the Jews. Bad Zionist Jews. Except that's not what this letter was. Zionism is the propaganda layer. This is not a bunch of Jewish people in a conspiracy that wanted a homeland. This is a bunch of chemists in a conspiracy that wanted access to potash. Theodor Herzl, the founder of Zionism, had already identified that Dead Sea potash extraction would be the financial foundation of a Jewish state project. The men put forward to run the Zionist leadership understood exactly what was in the ground and what was needed to get it out. And immediately after this declaration, the British take Jerusalem and send Major T.G. Tulloch, a military engineer, specifically to survey the Dead Sea's mineral potential. Herbert Samuel, who had circulated that cabinet memorandum, was then made the first High Commissioner of Palestine. He then stood up at a lecture and declared the Dead Sea minerals to be worth £800 million sterling. That'll tell you about his priorities. So when Weizmann said, "All I want is a homeland for my people," but can you just conveniently put it on the territory that the British government's own surveyors have just assessed contains 2 billion tonnes of potash? No charge. Just Palestine. Today, the Dead Sea still produces 4 million tonnes of potash every year and generates $3 billion annually. The homeland that this chemist asked for just happens to be sitting on top of the most valuable chemical deposit on Earth.
Breaking news. You guys ready for a good laugh? UN delegate Francesca Albanese, who has openly talked about how a certain country, let's call them Israel, holds strong sway over U.S. politics and decisions, is now facing the full force of that very influence in the most ironic possible way.
She is banned entry from the United States. She cannot use a bank card. She cannot use a debit card. She cannot receive a payment. It sends a message of deterrence, and after she was sanctioned, we got her husband, who works for the World Bank, who shares in her incitement. He was demoted from his position at the World Bank for incitement to hate.
𓂀𓁧𓁞𓁢 from UN Watch stood in front of a cheering crowd and proudly bragged about how they helped slap sanctions on her, shutting down her ability to live normally. She can't use a credit card, can't open or use a debit card, and basically has no bank account anywhere in the world because banks everywhere are scared of U.S. secondary penalties that could hit them hard. This leaves her completely unbanked, relying on cash for everything, struggling with simple payments, and facing what she calls a kind of a financial isolation of civil death. They even went after her husband, reportedly getting him demoted from his real bank job over related claims. It's almost comical how the reaction to her criticism proves her point. Talk about control, and suddenly you're cut off from everyday life. While she can still fly commercially on many routes outside the U.S., the lack of having a credit card or debit card makes booking flights, renting cars, or handling travel a constant headache, forcing her to depend on her friends and cash only. But honestly, you just can't make this stuff up. She calls out the control, and boom, they prove her right by freezing her out financially and making normal life a nightmare. It's straight up control that they call blood libel and anti-Semitism, and it shows exactly why so many of us are fed up with how things really work behind the scenes.
I have 3 questions today for Israeli people. Through this press conference, I want to speak to them directly. What kind of people are your soldiers who would allow a 14-year-old child to bleed to death over a 45-minute period? What kind of people are your military leaders that would inculcate a culture that soldiers feel free to do this, acting with total impunity? What kind of people are your leaders when they give orders, they make statements that encourage this kind of conduct, not merely permit it, but encourage it? And certainly not the food required by a child with celiac disease. That's when her weight loss began. In October 2025, suffering from severe acute malnutrition, she was admitted to the Nasser Medical Centre. The doctors applied for her to be medically evacuated from Gaza so that she could receive the level of treatment needed to save her life. The Israeli authorities did not reply. In October 2025, the child died. She didn't die of celiac disease. Children don't die of celiac disease. She died of starvation, the direct result of the policies implemented by the Israeli government and the Israeli military. Oh, and I should add, 2 weeks after she died, the Israeli authorities approved her medical evacuation. There can be no doubt in anyone who reads today's report that every international legal norm has been violated by the actions of the Israeli authorities towards Palestinian children, and they need to be held accountable.
When I read the news with the title that for once even the BBC couldn't avoid, that the UN had identified that Israel has been committing genocide against the Palestinians by targeting children, I felt a very specific type of hollowness that might resonate with you. It's a hollowness that I've never expected to experience in my life, of being right about a genocide. Because being right about something, usually for me, was something almost euphoric. But there's no possible euphoria when you see that the thing that you warned was going to happen, the thing that you identified as it was happening, the thing that you continue to scream about, because despite all international agreements continues to happen, is finally institutionally recognized. Because of this institutional recognition that comes late, as institutional recognitions often come, because of the processes that are attached to be able to make them a reality, you start seeing a shift in patterns around you. But the people who dismissed you, the people who said that you were hysteric or that you were focusing too much on something that was too difficult, the very newspapers that have demonized both Palestinians and you, start realizing that they're going to be trapped in the wrong side of history, though they are starting to rush to change the narrative a bit for plausible deniability. But rather than taking it as a victory for a global movement that was relentless, that did not stop, highlighted it, that brought attention to it, to the cost of lives and livelihoods. From the hundreds of reporters murdered in Gaza to get us the news in the first place, the people who lost their liberty and their lives and their livelihoods outside of Gaza. Pilot a horror that should have been evident to everyone in the world, because despite of the fact that you didn't have any institutional recognition, you had the images of it happening in real time. And yet all you can feel is hollowness, because of the spaces in the world that those children that are mentioned on that report left in their wake. All you can think about is how the world could have been different. If you're feeling like that, here's a hug. You're not alone.
Listen, when we say that the IDF and the Israeli government are terrorist organizations, we're not being hyperbolic. We're not even basing this solely off the extreme levels of terror we watch them inflict daily on the peoples of Palestine and Lebanon. The IDF are not only terrorists, they are the original terrorists. They invented terrorism in a region now synonymous with that word. This is not up for debate. This is fact. Not sure? Then fucking listen up. In the 1880s, Jewish settlers began moving into Palestine with funding from Baron Edmund de Rothschild. Yes, those Rothschilds. To begin what Theodor Herzl, the godfather of Zionism, described as a colonial enterprise. Immediately, Palestinians were violently subjugated and pushed from lands on which they had lived for generations. Quote from Russian Jewish journalist Ahad Hem, "They behaved towards the Arabs with cruelty and hostility, trespassed unjustly upon their boundaries, beat them shamefully without reason, and even brag of it." And when did he say this? In 1891. In 1907, a group of recently settled Russian Jews formed a militia called Bar Goa to protect these Rothschild-funded settlements and form a Hebrew military force that would organize and implement an armed uprising to bring about its ultimate aim, the creation of an independent Jewish state. In 1909, Bar Goa was absorbed by the newly founded and larger Hashoma. In 1920, the Hashoma became the Haganah. Now the Haganah, they stepped things up. They contaminated water wells in Palestinian villages with typhoid virus, and they bombed a cruise liner deporting Jewish refugees. Their aim was to disable the ship, but they sunk the ship and killed 276 people. But don't worry, because the Haganah were only moderates. In 1931, a faction that believed the Haganah were not doing enough for the dream of a Jewish state split and formed the 𝓂𓁧𓁞𓁢𝓁. The 𝓂𓁧𓁢𝓁 actively massacred Palestinian villages. They bombed the British administration headquarters in 1946, killing 97 civilians, and carried out multiple bombing and grenade attacks in crowded Palestinian civilian markets. The UN, Britain, and the US all described the 𝓂𝓁 as a Jewish terrorist group. They were condemned by Albert Einstein, who compared them to the Nazis. The 𝓂𝓁 eventually became Israel's Herut Party, which would later become Israel's Likud Party. Sound familiar? That's because it's the party of Benjamin Netanyahu. But wait, it gets even better. The 𝓂𝓍, or the Stern Gang, were formed in 1940 as an offshoot to the 𝓂𝓁. The 𝓂𝓍 described themselves as terrorists. And just wait till you hear this. The 𝓂𝓍 sought to form an alliance with Nazi Germany during World War II. 𝓂𝓍 offered to take part in the war on the side of Nazi Germany in return for the establishment of a Jewish state on a totalitarian basis that would be treated with Nazi Germany. Even when the full scale of Hitler's atrocities became clear, 𝓂𝓍's support did not waver. After the Nakba of 1948, the Haganah, 𝓂𝓍 and 𝓂𝓁 all formed to create the IDF. 4 of the first 5 Prime Ministers of Israel were founding or prominent members of the Haganah terrorist militia. The 6th Prime Minister of Israel was Menachem Begin, commander of the 𝓂𝓁 terrorist group, who would go on to win the Nobel Peace Prize in 1979. The 7th Prime Minister was 𓂀𝓧h Shamir, a 𝓂𝓍 commander who would go on to serve 2 tenures as Prime Minister. So to be very clear, the IDF and the Israeli government are terrorist organizations and have been from day one. And this, you fucking Zionist dogs, is not up for debate.
When you look at systemic racism, you're looking at trends that have affected the wealth gap between the races historically in the United States. This is not about a person being a racist or your grandma being a racist. It has to do with what the economy looked like for white persons and black persons historically in this country. Back during the time of the Civil War, the white folks had 56 times more wealth on average than a black person. So it was 56 to 1. Just 10 years later, in 1870, after Reconstruction, that gap went from 56 to 1 to 23 to 1. Pretty dramatic improvement in 10 years. The reason for that market improvement is that while black people were now allowed to purchase land and assets, so black wealth was going up, simultaneously white wealth was coming down because what was a huge part of their wealth? Slaves. Human beings that they were no longer allowed to own. By 1900, the gap had closed all the way to 11 to 1. The average white person had 11 times more wealth than the average black person. And then it stalled out. And the reason it stalled out is because black people were still being discriminated against. They didn't have the same access to credit, if any access to credit. Legislative attempts at narrowing the gap were shot down, trying to finish narrowing the gap were shot down, like the 40 acres and a mule thing that never got passed. They faced widespread discrimination in education. The schools were still segregated and they weren't getting the best funding and they weren't getting the best teachers. They were discriminated against in the workforce. Now from 1900, when it was 11 to 1, to 1960, over 60 years, the gap squeezed a little bit smaller to 8 to 1. So for For every black family that had $10,000 in total assets, the average white family had 80,000 in total assets, okay? And how did we go from 11 to 1 to 8 to 1? Well, a couple things happened. FDR made it illegal to discriminate against black workers, but only for purposes of the military and government positions. But still, every little bit helps. And then also, you had World War I and World War II. So many white men left the American workforce that black men were finally able to start moving up into higher paid positions. That doesn't mean they were paid the same as the white person who had previously done that job, but they were being paid more than they were previously, and they were getting access to higher skilled work. So then by the 1980s, the gap had closed to 5 to 1. And what was helping close the gap? Civil rights that had taken place between 1965 and 1980. Fair Housing Act, federal minimum wage that did not discriminate. So those things were helping close that gap just a little bit. So that takes us up to 1980. But what has happened in the last 45 years? We were at 5 to 1 gap. How much have we closed since then? None. In the last 45 years, we've gone backwards. So we are now at a 6 to 1 gap. The average white family has 6 times more wealth than the average black family. And why is that happening? Well, because wealth compounds. It's not just about who has the ability to earn X salary. It's that the white families were starting with more wealth, more property, more stocks, bonds, etc. And they're able to compound that wealth. Whereas if the black and brown populations are starting without those assets, they don't have the ability to compound. They end up having to spend what they earn. They have to consume the majority of the income that they're earning just to sustain a living. This isn't about blaming an individual. It's not about vilifying people. What it is about is exploring and understanding the economics behind why we have that gap so that we can address those things with policy moving forward.
What if I told you that the first step in getting rid of the world's billionaires is to simply believe that they do not have as much power and money as you think they do? Strap in, because like all of my thoughts, this is a developing thought, and I'm going to be referencing my notes while we talk about it. So last night, me and my husband were talking about the fact that we don't actually believe that billionaires are real. Not real in the fact that they don't exist, real in the fact that their money isn't real. And so naturally, we did some research because duh, that's what we would do. And here's what we came up with. Billionaires are very much real, but the number and the dollar amount that they have is largely theoretical. Most of us peasants down here in the middle class, our net worth directly equates to how much we owe on things like our home and our cars versus how much money like cash we have in the bank. But when we're talking about billionaires, most of their net worth is not liquid. Elon Musk's net worth is mostly tied up in Tesla and SpaceX. Mark Zuckerberg's net worth is mostly tied up in Meta. Jeff Bezos, most of his net worth is tied up in Amazon stock. None of these people just have billions of dollars sitting around in cash in a bank account. So much of the worth that billionaires have is perceived worth. What other people believe their items or their properties or their things are worth. Charles Leclerc is not a billionaire, but he's a good example. He just bought his third yacht, which I think was like $15 million. That yacht is only worth $15 million because that's what somebody else might pay for it if he chooses to sell it. If he puts it on the market and nobody wants to buy it for like 5 years, it's not actually worth $15 million because nobody's going to pay for it. The value of that yacht is tied up largely in what people think it could be worth if somebody chose to buy it. If nobody chooses to buy it, if nobody else believes it's worth that, then it's not. So how do billionaires actually have their wealth? Well, they have all of this stock and then they borrow against that stock instead of selling it, and they borrow it at these like low interest loans. And what they borrow, right, that money is very real and it's very spendable, but they do that so that way they don't have to pay taxes. So that dollar amount, that number amount that they have, that is the perceived value. It could be different on any given day, right? But the power that comes with that buying power, that is very much real. So the political influence they have, the ability to acquire things, all of that is real. And so it's less about that person being a billionaire and more about being a person with $1 billion worth of leverage over other people in a capitalist environment. So the next question that we had was, let's say Tesla, right? It's only as valuable as people believe it is because people keep buying Teslas. If everybody tomorrow decided to stop buying Teslas, would that mean that Tesla's no longer worth anything? And the answer is pretty much yes, and this actually almost happened a few years ago. Stock price is essentially investors betting collectively on potential future earnings. When people buy stock in Tesla, they're not buying a car on a lot. They're buying a belief that Tesla will make more money in the future. So that stock price reflects what millions of investors agree all at the same time that worth is based on that belief. So if everybody tomorrow decided to stop buying Teslas, all the revenue would collapse. The investors that believed that Tesla would do well are going to stop believing that Tesla's worth anything. So then what are they going to do? They're going to sell the stock as quick as they can. The price is going to just completely bottom out. And Elon Musk is going to lose tens of billions of dollars on paper overnight. And from 2021 to 2023, Tesla stock dropped 75%, and Elon Musk lost $200 billion of his net worth because the perceived value of Tesla basically evaporated. The belief that it would be better or that it would do more in the future was gone. The valuation that Tesla had was based on this belief that it would dominate the global auto market. And at one point, it was worth more than 10 car brands combined. However, that valuation only makes sense if you believe the story that they're telling you about what's going to happen, not just what is currently happening in this moment. Are you guys tracking what I'm saying so far? So much of this comes back to the story that's being told, right? The belief that something could happen moving forward. So if most billionaire wealth is tied up in the stock market, and the stock market is an invention of a capitalist system, you think, oh, well, if we get rid of capitalism, we get rid of billionaires. Yes and no. The stock market was supposed to solve a problem of how do you fund a very large enterprise without one person having all of the money? You split it into shares and you sell pieces of it to the public. It gives the appearance that the public has power when they really don't, because the majority of the company is still owned by one person. If we had socialism, the stock market would basically disappear. It wouldn't be worth anything, which is why billionaires fight so hard against socialism. You could do a mixed economy where it's like you have these robust social programs, which a lot of Europe has, and a stock market. And we're kind of there, but definitely not where we should be. So here comes the most important part: social constructionism. Social constructionism is the idea that most of the systems within that humans operate aren't natural laws like gravity, right? They are agreed upon fictions that work because enough people believe in them and act accordingly. Money is the clearest example of social constructionism because money is just a piece of paper, right? It's some linen. It has value because the US government says it has, and enough people agree that it does. If that collective agreement that the dollar has value, if that just collapsed overnight, then overnight that bill would be worthless. Nothing about that piece of paper changed. The belief changed. Let's talk really quickly about why billionaires seek power. Billionaires seek power as an insurance policy. They know at any point in time, the collective underneath them could just simply decide that they don't want to buy that billionaire shit anymore, and they could be worth less. So what they do is they try to fight to get into positions of power so that way they can be inside the system that forms your belief. A good example of this is Tom Steyer trying to run for governor in California. The man has everything that he needs. Why does he want to be governor? So that he can be in charge of the system that forms the belief of millions of Californians. But again, everything comes down to collective belief. A president only has power because millions of people agree to behave like he does. An army follows orders because soldiers agree that the chain of command is legitimate. A billionaire can buy influence because people agree that that billionaire's money means something. One person cannot force millions of people to obey. Governments actually rule by consent, even those in authoritarian government styles, right? So the moment that people withdraw their consent simultaneously, all at the same time, the whole thing collapses. And that's where every revolution that we've ever seen actually is. It's a massive withdrawal of belief all at once. So how does this all tie back into how do we get rid of billionaires by simply believing that they shouldn't exist anymore? If everybody all at once simply said, we don't believe that billionaires should exist anymore, what happens? People start acting differently. Remember during the pandemic when they said, oh, these $2,000 checks are coming? You start behaving differently when you believe money is on the way. You start looking at shopping more. You start looking at vacations more. You start moving differently when you believe something is about to happen for you for good. If you believed that Elon Musk shouldn't be a billionaire, you would stop caring about SpaceX. You would stop buying Teslas. You would stop being on Twitter or X. If you don't believe that Jeff Bezos should be a billionaire, then everybody collectively would stop shopping at Amazon. The reason we don't do any of these things is because it's also minorly inconvenient for us. And it becomes a coordination problem. To get a million people, millions and millions of people to believe the same thing and withdraw their belief at the exact same time, who's going to want to do that? And so the system perpetuates itself not because it's true, but because everyone assumes that everyone else also believes it, so they just keep behaving like they do too. Dismantling the wealth of billionaires is actually very simple. All you have to do is believe that they shouldn't exist, and your actions will begin to follow as though you don't want them to exist. They only exist because we continue to give them our labor and our power and our money because what they've done is convenient for us. The reason they fight so hard to keep us where we are is because they know how fragile their power actually is. And if we fought harder, they wouldn't exist. Thanks for coming to my TED Talk.
Never forget that what you're rebelling against is a homicidal, genocidal, pedophilic collection of war profiteering sociopaths who have hijacked society's power structures from within and are weaponizing them against all life on Earth.
Inventors. Don't forget, while you're you have to enjoy the little things. That's persistence, right? Anything to, centralize and stuff like that. And acknowledge those people that you are watching the suffering in. Nobody wants to be doing this, but a lot of you have to do it because they're not going to show it in the media. And then there's going to be assholes acting like really fucking stupid, embarrassing themselves. It's embarrassing. Coño. Yeah, so that's why a lot of you have a little pocket, a little book, a little everything already done for you. Discernment and everything. And for a lot of you, we're all supposed to be doing this in a different form, a different way, and together. How do we stop these type of evil, huh? How? Let's go. They know what we're gonna do, but we're gonna do it better. That's what I think. Ah, my favorite tree. Hey. I brought my tarot cards. I wanted to charge them in nature and see what happens. See what we do, what we get. There's a lot of people intimidated or a lot of not sure where to categorize you or put you on. That's fine. That's none of your business. That's not your problem either. But a lot of you feel that you're intuitively, spirit is giving you nudges of who could potentially be just trying to plan something, which is, anyways, just giving you a heads up. Not that you need to worry about anything if you stand in your truth and integrity and you are not doing weird shit to people and trying to create some type of this energy is really low vibration. They want to look a lot of you, you're not in competition with this person. I think this person has a competitive energy or something. It's really strange. It's a weird energy. Maybe for you, the message is going to nature. Maybe this whole video had to be done here.
Go near water, plants, or something like that. Sit down. Slow down. Capitalism need propaganda to be, constantly pumping. So, be aware of that energy. Be aware of white supremacy tactics. That's what we teach you guys here. That's when you become spiritual warriors first, and then you in the physical, whatever you want to be. But protect your energy, protect your platform. I talk about that in the live. So, but my goodness.
This is why we know how many calories you need to survive. And it's one of the darkest parts of Native history. In the 1940s and 50s, Canadian researchers did experiments on the youngest members of Native nations. And they happened in the residential schools that Natives were forced to go to. And they were run by the government and the church. And they were already malnourished, before it even started. The researchers tested the effects of supplements, milk, restricted diets, and there was no consent ever given by anyone. They just did it because they could. Some were deliberately denied nutrients and dental care, so that researchers could see the effects of malnutrition. And historians, not Native historians, say that these studies helped to shape our modern understanding of nutrition and influenced Canada's food guide, a little bit of America's as well. So the reason why we know how many vitamins and nutrients and calories you need is because these were the lab rats. This is where the information came from. In institutions that were already known for neglect, abuse, overcrowding, and starvation. So I guess it made it easy for them. When they weren't being human guinea pigs, they were being assimilated, denied language, culture, connection to family, spirituality, and ultimately identity. And if they did speak in their own language, they were punished. Some of them even unalived. They suffered disease, abuse, medical neglect. And when they ultimately passed, well, they just blamed where they came from. Because we as Native people are treated as less than human. And if you think this doesn't go on now, I hate to break this to you, bestie. It's not as bad as this. But you ever wonder why natives live in food deserts? Many don't have access to clean water, healthcare, mental health care, why native women get sterilized. You start to put the pieces together. It's actually pretty horrifying that it's still going on. It's just rebranded. It just looks different. And as for the assimilation, go into a workplace wearing your regalia as a man or a boy. Go into your school wearing your long hair and your braids and tell me how quick you're sent home for violating dress codes. And lastly, many of the natives that did attend these schools, they're still alive today because the last one didn't close until the 90s, the mid-90s. So in your generation, your parents' generation, your grandparents' generation, this was happening. Not 400 years ago, or recently.
A UN commission just found Israel guilty of committing genocide in Gaza by inflicting death and bodily and mental harm on hundreds of thousands of Palestinian children in a deliberate strategy to destroy the future of all Palestinians. More specifically, the report found that Israel is targeting Palestinian children by shooting at their vital organs and by striking residential buildings, schools, and hospitals using high-impact weapons, such as bombs that literally evaporate every trace of you from the face of the earth. Israel was also found to be guilty of failing to protect Palestinian children from being targeted, tortured, and sexually abused by Israeli soldiers and settlers, which sadly makes sense because they're the ones doing the targeting, torturing, and sexual abusing. They attack displacement camps crowded with children, they attack neonatal and pediatric facilities, and they use starvation as a method of ethnic cleansing and genocide. Our tax dollars at work, folks. But despite these findings, if we know anything, it's that Israelis are going to lie in the face of photo and video evidence of their crimes, while also claiming they're somehow the victims. And what I really want people to take away from this here is that this is not the first time this conclusion has been reached following an investigation. Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch both said this was happening. The Lemkin Institute of Genocide Prevention, Genocide Watch, and the International Association of Genocide Scholars also all said it was happening. Even Israel's own human rights organizations have come out and said they are indeed committing a genocide. And what's more is that when they aren't crying anti-Semitism, Israelis themselves are literally bragging about how they're doing it every chance they get. I mean, just look at what this top Israeli official, Itamar Ben-Gvir, said just a couple days ago about Israel's invasion of Lebanon. That a few dead Israeli colonizers is justification in itself to burn all of Lebanon to the ground, conveniently forgetting all of the thousands of Lebanese people Israel has already killed. These monsters are the Nazis of the 21st century. We know it, they know it, everyone knows it. Their favorability ratings and approvals are tanking worldwide. Israeli settlers are being denied entry to entire countries, being banned from establishments, and being forced to look into the mirror at their ghoulish, grotesque, genocidal reflections. And the coinciding crash outs that we see all over social media are just a symptom of their lies no longer being tolerated or believed anymore. You can't make never again your national war cry at the same time that you do that exact same thing to another group of people. Never again means never again for everybody, or else it's just as functionally hollow as I imagine each one of your souls is. And you as politicians are repeatedly, consistently pulling the levers that fund it all, using our taxpayer dollars. Meaning we're just about as complicit in this genocide as the monsters carrying out the violence firsthand. The good news, relatively, is that we still have a few levers of power at our disposal as well. Midterm primaries are happening right now ahead of the general elections in November. So get informed, get involved, and get out there and vote for candidates who are for the working class and unbought by Israel. Let me know what you guys think about this, and while I have you, I'd appreciate if you could do anything you can to get me out of algorithm jail. Like, repost, share with a friend, comment your thoughts, and follow me for more like this, because there's gonna be more.
People truly don't really understand the depth of intention that white people put into making sure that black people remained under the foot of white supremacy. They set up, in a way, every group to be against black people specifically, which is weird because if you consider black people 3/5 human, if you consider us insignificant and uneducated and all these things, why do you have to work so hard to keep us down, to keep us under the foot of white supremacy if that's our natural place in the world? That right there should tell you that there is a whole lot more to it than what meets the eye. I know we say this a lot on here, but I truly believe there is a lot more to the story than what we've been told to believe. If you truly believe that a group of people are less than you, you don't have to do any of the additional work, right? If black people are truly the lowest of the low, scientifically unintelligent, criminals by nature, then why does it require you to put all of these systems in place, all of these things, all these systems, these policies and procedures and things in place to keep black people from ever rising above their circumstances? Why would you need to do that if our natural place, our natural order in the world is below you? Because it ain't. Because it ain't. And you know it ain't. You know that episode of Dragon Ball when Goku and Krillin are training and Master Roshi puts those weights on them when they're the kids. He puts these weights on them. And when they take the weights off, they can jump really, really high. And they're like, black people are currently wearing those weights. We just got to figure out how to take them off.
A new report from the United Nations is accusing Israeli forces of intentionally targeting.
Yes, you gotta go read that report, and what are they saying is true. It's the first time I see truth being exposed for real in the past 3 years. It took them 3 years to get to this point. And of course, you have the parasitic demonic energy saying, the same ritual, dark magic, witchcraft. October 7th. History didn't start on October 7th, first of all. Let's make that clear. And you see at the end, they have to say those things because, I don't know what's the fear, because that's it. These motherfuckers, Zionists, they own the fucking media. They own it. So even if they have to expose the truth because it is mandated and it is part of you have to respect international law because there is a lot of impunity. You see at the end of that video, they're saying how Israel, UN is trying to vilify Israel. They're not trying to do anything. You're doing it yourself. Nobody's doing anything. This is why it's so funny. They are doing all the action, all the impunity, all the evil that you can possibly imagine, horrendous stuff. And then they called us anti-Semitic for vilifying them, for exposing basically them, for telling you all the truth. Even the all media that they own, that we know is we know they're not. This is why you look for independent sources. This is why we have been showing you this for 3 years from other places, other sources that will never wanted to show you for the first place. Finally, they do it, and Israel is freaking out. Their propaganda narrative is not working. That's it. They're mad about that. No, they're not mad. This is why it's so, like, this society is so sick. They're not mad of feeling regret or guilt or shame for the stuff that they have been doing for 3 years, and the lying and the, you know what I'm saying, and their obsession with creating the project fucking Israel, no matter what the fuck, or no matter who they killed, and ethnic cleanse, and they don't care. They're literally saying deliberately target children. Let that sink in. And then they call you anti-Semitic for showing the proof. For all these international, all these doctors, all these people doing this research, that all of this is documented. I have half of the documentation for the past 3 years in my Telegram. You can press the pin and it's there. Now everybody who speaks the truth, who expose their war crimes and the stuff that they're doing, you're anti-Semitic now. Oh, it's propaganda. That energy, the as you see in the video that lasted like October 7, it's Hamas and blah 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 and all this, like they're trying so hard for all of you to continue buying their like, it's like a dark magic energy. It's like a witchcraft energy. Like, it's so weird. It's so weird. It's gross. I recommend a lot of you to read this article. I know there's a lot of other creators who have decided to read it for you, go into lives and stuff like that. So make sure you're sharing that. You need to read this. A lot of you, they're expecting you not to read it, and it's not a propaganda. This is real stuff. I want you to read this article too, okay, from the Maple. Make sure that you're reading it as well, especially if you're Canadian, okay? I talk about this before. I talk about the lies, but also I posted already in my post. I just want to make sure that you guys are seeing the Canada Public Pension Investment Board is responsible for investing the pensions of 22 million Canadians from all provinces and territories except Quebec. Workers make mandatory contributions from their paychecks into the funds. This is rape mentality. A lot of people don't know this. They're doing this without your consent. Yeah? Except Quebec? Why? Why not Quebec, huh? Not complaining. I'm from Quebec, but they're telling you where the billionaires, motherfuckers who approve this shit legally, right? Where they live, where they are. They don't want to get prosecuted. They don't want people going after them. They're here. Pay attention. They're telling you, which is worth $793. Do you know all that money that can be done with all that money instead of investing in this shit like and bullshit? Now let's talk about the evil cripples companies that this investment is doing. Oh, Palantir, Lockheed Martin, always the motherfucking evil motherfuckers, right? This investment, $1 billion in Palantir, what the fuck, provides software platform to both Israel, USA, in which the UN has said might be providing Israel with technology to create automated lists and military targets. And now you know that also they have, this company right here has targeted deliberately children, Palestinian children. The UN reported to you. Just want to make you put two and two together, okay? Oh, the other Cooper, Amazon. What? Of course. Which provides storage. Wow. Fossil fuel companies, 1.8 billion. ExxonMobil, which may be facilitating to fuel supplies for Israel tanks and jets. 10.8 billion. Nvidia Corp, major AI company that's allegedly used the Israel military. Oh no, they're not involved in Canada. They're not involved in our politics. They're not parasitic energy. They're not trying to also, like, you know, benefit from the fruit of our labor, right? And, you know, using our taxes for really evil, fucked up shit, instead of all this money being invested in free education, free housing, free healthcare, you know, for Canadians, not for Canadian, not for this motherfucking shit. Fuck this shit, right? No. 700 millions in Caterpillar, a manufacturer of armed bulldozer used by Israel forces to destroy Palestinians. I show you this in the West Bank. Every video I show you of these motherfucking machines destroying homes in the West Bank, Palestinian homes. And now, and then after, when I show you all the stuff that they're doing, you also see it at the media, you see in other places where they are selling homes illegally from the West Bank after they destroy it. It's all connected, right? No, but we are anti-Semitic for showing you the truth and stuff, right? 344 million in Lockheed Martin. This is a motherfucking evil motherfucking shit. This should not exist. All of this shit. All of these are complicit. All of this. This is why I tell you we need to do parasitic cleansing. It's not just in Canada. You're in the USA. But I'm just showing you the motherfuckers who are creepers. Okay. Every working Canadian is either paying into it, and then when you get to be a certain age, you are receiving the benefits from it. Oh, benefit from it. Just like Carney talking, you know, it's worth it. Genocide and killing and, right? So I feel in a way we are funding the genocide, which is horrifying. Yeah, you should be horrified. You should be ashamed of all of you. Manufacturer F-35 jet used to drop bombs as heavy as 2,000 pounds in Gaza. Canada is deeply integrated and supportive of Israel's illegal occupation and settler colonial project. That's not new. Not new. It's not. We've been ringing the alarm for a lot of you for decades now. And I'm going to leave this because it is connected to this. It is. I know a lot of you don't want to listen to environmental scientists or people who are environment, who are climate activists and stuff like that. A lot of you don't want to hear it. Oh, but why you focus so much on military complex? Why you so focused so much, like, why do you stop doing your videos of climate change and stuff like that? Because when you reach that threshold in capitalism, you realize that everything is connected, and these are the motherfuckers. Always have been. All these assholes and oligarchs and fossil fuel companies who should not exist. This is why a lot of you, we have to end capitalism, because it's unlivable. Antarctica having heat wave? How did we get to that point? That's what we know also. When you get to $1 trillion, having a trillion person, and also at the same time heat waves and not having accessible clean water for the world, that's how you know how the human, they're letting you all know. But no, it's anti-Semitic for you to say those things when they're literally deliberately doing that. They don't care if they have to destroy the entire planet to have their project, ideology, or whatever. And also to save their pellejo, to try to save their reputation and stuff like that, which is already trash. It's already, their fate is already, So I'm giving you the proof of this is who you need to blame. Not your immigrant friends, not your neighbors, not your people of color, okay? It's not about race. Racism is used for capitalists to continue stealing from you. You know who they are, and you know what the parasitic cleansing needs to be done. I love you. Free Palestine, free Congo, free Sudan, and free the world from this parasitic Zionist motherfucking pedophile rapist energy. And capitalism. Fuck this shit. For real. Free your mind, yo.
So something that I feel like more people need to know, data centers don't actually need water. They need cooling systems. And they're using water because it's the cheapest way to do it. Yeah. Data centers, they generate like a shitload of heat. And if the heat's not removed somehow, the servers will overheat and it all stops working. So when people are hearing like AI is consuming millions of gallons of water, we're all just assuming it's like this unavoidable part of the technology, but that's actually not true. And it almost is like worse. They don't need water. They're just doing this for no fucking reason because it's the cheapest option. They need cooling. There are alternatives. And I've wrote a few of them down. There's immersion cooling systems. They can literally submerge servers in a specifically designed synthetic fluid that absorbs heat. There's dielectric coolants that can circulate through equipment without conducting electricity. There's closed loop cooling systems that recycle coolant instead of constantly consuming fresh water. Dry cooling systems that use the air instead of evaporation. I don't know, I could pay people to blow on them to cool them off before wasting our water. Another thing, companies can even build data centers in colder climates to reduce cooling demands in the first place. The technology exists, is my point. The issue is that many of those alternatives that I just explained to you are more expensive. And that's the part that I think is interesting. Yeah, it's interesting they're wasting all the water. What's more interesting is they don't have to waste the water. Ordinary people, we're always told, like, conserve our water, take shorter showers, and water your lawn less, follow drought restrictions, be mindful of your water consumption. Meanwhile, some of the wealthiest corporations on earth are consuming enormous amounts of water because it's the cheapest way to cool their infrastructure. There's a difference between something that's necessary and something being the cheapest option available. When a human uses water, it's because they will die without it. When a data center uses water, it's because somebody in a boardroom ran the numbers and decided it was the most cost-effective cooling method. Who cares about the drinking water? The data centers. And I think that's a conversation that's worth having. Because if water is essential for human life, maybe human beings should have priority access to water before the latest AI model does. Just a thought.
I think at this point I've just accepted that the Earth has had multiple extinction events, and we're due. We're due for one. Because when you accept the fact that most people are stupid and ants in this world who aren't going to revolt like in A Bug's Life, they're not going to do it. They're not going to do it. Y'all aren't going to do it. It's not going to happen. Y'all are just cogs in the wheel. You don't care. Like, as long as the system leaves you comfortable, nothing's going to change. Jordan Lake is dried up. No, not completely dried up, but a lot of dried up. And then I've seen other videos of other rivers and lakes in other states being dried up. And this is just the beginning of the data centers. They're trying to do more. Elon Musk is now a trillionaire, and you have people in the comment sections praising him as if they could ever get to that level. Oh, he worked so hard. How do you know? How do you know what he did? Wasn't he born into riches? You weren't, dumbass. You dumbass. You're so stupid. You're a bootlicker from one of the ugliest, nastiest looking weirdos who acts like he doesn't even go here. He's an alien parading around to different countries, starting riots. Or putting his nasty alien hands, his roach hands, into the U.S. government and then leaving. Starting riots in Northern Ireland. Starting riots with the other ugly white people. This is so crazy. It's so crazy. What are we doing here? And then a lot of you idiots are like, God's gonna fix it. No, he's not. What happened with the last few extinction events? Did he stop it? One of them, supposedly, according to your book, he did. He did the other mass extinction event that happened, that didn't actually happen. And the thing is, y'all understand that it's gonna take violence to get rid of the wicked. Because your own book says it, and that's what you're waiting for. You're waiting for your God to do it. Meanwhile, you make excuses by talking about free will when the wicked are still doing wicked things to innocent people. And the wicked doing innocent things to innocent, or the wicked doing wicked things to innocent people are the ones in your church. A large percentage of the time. It's almost like abusers and violent people run to the church for forgiveness so they can keep doing it. These people are in the way of progress. The billionaires, the selfish pricks are in the way. And the people who protect them, no matter who they are also in the way. From the bootlickers to the law enforcement. These people will hurt you for property. They'll kill you. They'll kill babies over supposedly stolen diapers. Meanwhile, Walmart could have made that money back in seconds. But hey, now a 1-year-old is dead. So many people are in the way of progress because they're stupid. They're fucking stupid. A lot of you are idiots. You're morons. Your head is in your ass and you don't want to pull it out because it's warm and cozy. You fucking idiot. I hate it here, and that's why I've realized I have to be selfish. I have to do what I want to do. Unless I want to help initiate some kind of change, I don't know. I don't know what to do. Because the activism that we have now ain't cutting it. Rivers are still dried up despite your protests. Babies still dying, black people still dying despite your protests. Asian people killing black people getting away with it despite your protests. If the violence that you're waiting for to come biblically, if you just did it yourself, maybe things would change. Ah! Vengeance is mine, I will repay, says Jehovah. No, you won't. No, you won't. Where you at? Where are you at? If y'all want to make excuses about free will and how God is not going to stop people from doing wicked because they have the choice, then how about we take revenge? Since we have the free will to do it, instead of waiting for him to do so. Instead of waiting for your God to change things and enact the violence that he says he's gonna, why don't you do it? Why don't you do it? He'll forgive, right? He was taking too long, so you took matters into your own hands. Instead of allowing the wicked to continue to take matters into their own hands, since the wicked understand that violence is the answer, and they keep doing it and getting away with it, schools full of little girls, obliterated. Gaza, obliterated. The Congo. People having a rape day in Kenya. These people keep getting away with it. And they're gonna keep getting away with it. Unless you understand what they understand. Violence. We're animals at the end of the day. Maybe we should start acting like it. I don't know. Because being civilized is what's keeping us from changing the world. And the world is being destroyed by these animals. They don't care about the average human being. They don't care. They'll do things like vote in a crazy administration and then flee to Argentina. Peter Thiel. Are we kidding? Are we kidding? They will influence the masses and then run like fucking ugly, hideous cowards. Peter Thiel? You fucking ghoul? These people, Luigi was right. Luigi was right. These people all need to be Leviticist. If you don't know what I mean, look at one of my last videos. I think it's Leviticus 24:14. We need to use that as a verb. So many people need to be Leviticist.
I'm here today at the Canadian Museum for Human Rights for the launch of the Nakba exhibit, Palestine Uprooted, and it's a deeply moving and important moment shared with Winnipeg's diverse communities and people from outside of the province too. Standing here, listening to survivors and members of the Palestinian Canadian community share their stories is a powerful reminder of why museums matter. Museums are among the most trusted public institutions in our society. They shape how we understand history, whose stories are remembered, and whose voices are finally heard. To know, feel, and do. To know the stories, to feel the emotions, and to do through touching the artifacts, the keys, the property deeds, the tatrees, the keffeya, the Jaffa oranges, to read the poetry. That's why this exhibit is so incredibly important. It is part of the need to recognize Palestinian displacement as part of the global reality of the pain of forced displacement, which leads to human rights violation upon violation, and ultimately can and has led to genocide. For generations, Palestinian Canadians have carried stories of displacement, loss, survival, and resilience, stories passed down through families, but too often absent from the public record. This exhibit creates space for survivors and their descendants to share those lived experiences in their own words. The Nakba is not only a historical event that began in 1948. For many Palestinians, its impact continued today through that separation from their families, the ongoing struggle to preserve their identities, their cultures, and their communities. It is long overdue for these experiences to be recognized in one of Canada's national human rights institutions. These stories are part of Canada's story too, and they deserve to be heard. When museums make room for these voices, they don't just preserve history, they help us build a more informed, compassionate, and just future where human dignity is not reserved for a few, but is our shared human birthright, belonging to Palestinians, belonging to all of us. Learn more. Help share this historic moment.
What made you speak out about other people's human rights but not the children of Gaza? Did you not see these kids as kids because of where they were born?
This woman fills me with so much anger I didn't even know it was humanly possible because she's such a hypocrite and she's so phony about it. She'll sit there and she'll wag the finger at us. Miss Advocate for All Children didn't want to be an advocate for Israeli children on October 7th. She says even in that sham UN report that she's holding, yeah, it actually talks about the torture that Israeli children were forced to endure, but she so conveniently leaves that part out of her video. It's almost like she has selective empathy for children based on where they're born.
So the Zionist who says that children who are being orphaned and slaughtered and maimed and starved is Pallywood wants to accuse somebody else of selective empathy. This Zionist wants you to focus on that little section in the UN report that talks about Israeli children, but she wants you to ignore the 94 pages that talks about the targeting of Palestinian children. She wants to talk about selective empathy. The Zionist who wants you to focus on October 7th, 2023, but ignore all the October 7ths every single day since against the Palestinians. She wants to talk about selective empathy. The one who loves talking about Anne Frank, but claims that 𝂀🁧𓁞𝁢 never existed. She wants to talk about selective empathy.
Certainly didn't speak for the Tassa family where Shay and Karen, who are only 8 and 12 years old, had to witness their father jump on a grenade to save their life.
But see, I love talking about that family because we have video footage of Hamas taking those children and putting them safely in a separate room, something the IOF would never do because the IOF would just snipe the children.
All of it is witness testimony and essentially, trust me, bro,
I wonder why that sounds so familiar.
They're also using numbers that are given by the Gaza Ministry of Health, which of course we know is run by Hamas. And there's no credible evidence. There's no third-party research into it. There's no verification of any of the stories.
I wonder why there's no third-party research. I wonder why there's no international investigation. You know, I think Maddie hasn't heard, but Israel has agreed that Hamas's numbers are correct because they desperately want people to believe that the death toll is only 75 to 80,000 people because they know that Hamas's numbers do not include people that are still missing, the ones that were kidnapped, killed, and thrown into mass graves, the ones that are still buried under the rubble, the ones that have been killed through disease and illnesses because the healthcare system is completely decimated. It doesn't include people that have starved to death. It doesn't include people whose entire families were slaughtered and there was nobody there to identify them. One day when the truth finally comes out, this 94-page report will actually be thousands and thousands of pages long.
The United Nations Independent Commission has found that the state of Israel is deliberately targeting children as a method of genocide. And I want everyone to focus on that word. Deliberate. This is pretty major because over the last couple of years, as Israel has killed over 20,000 children and wounded over 40,000 more, the wildly flimsy and already unethical argument is that they were just a casualty of war, that their deaths were this unavoidable tragic side effect of what had to be done to protect Israel, this incredibly hypothetical safe haven for the Jews of the world. But now we have 92 pages of hard evidence, including example after example of children being shot in their vital organs by precision weapons in broad daylight with zero threat of violence, zero active combat, anything like that around the premises. Again, deliberately. One was a 10-month-old baby breastfeeding with his mother inside a tent, shot in the head by a sniper rifle again, in broad daylight, with clear evidence that whoever pulled that trigger knew exactly what they were aiming at. This is finally so overt that even the BBC can't avoid naming it in their headlines. And it's starting to feel like stupefying to repeat this again and again and again, but I know how important it is for me to do so. There is no universe in which this report could possibly make me feel safe as a Jew. Even if it did improve my safety, which it doesn't, it makes me shudder to think how anyone would choose this. But the fact remains anyway that of course this does not make Jews safer in any way. It would be crazy to think so, that a genocide against one people could ever make another people safer. And the people who have concocted this horror know that. It should be so obvious by now that they have zero interest in fighting anti-Semitism. They want nothing but power. I have to believe, in a way, that we are entering into a new era of hope. I really, really do. And I do think that the tides are, in a way, turning. But man, they could stand to turn a little faster. Anyway, if you have anything to spare, please, please, please consider helping a family out a little bit. It's the very least we can do.